It's time for episode 17 of That Time I Got Reincarnated in the Same World as an Anime Podcaster.
I got distracted that thinking our episode number could almost buy smokes.
Where we talk about anime, manga, isekai, and all the meta in between. I'm your host, Isekai Sensei Sama, aka Brad, and I'm joined in this weeb cabal by Bento Baggins, aka Ben.
Hello.
And Kermit D. Grog, aka Andrew.
Ahoy hoy.
We're friends who've been watching anime for a long time and having conversations about it and the manga that we're reading. So those conversations turned into this podcast. So today, before we jump into our discussion, we've actually got a lot of stuff to go over.
Wow.
So in case anybody hasn't noticed, I actually do time codes for these. You can find them in like the podcast apps or on YouTube. They actually lets you jump around to different sections. Most of the time I just have, intro, a discussion, and then the isekai segment and so on. Today, what you'll find, many more time codes for this intro section because there's so many things that we're going to be going over here.
Wow.
So
busy boys.
If we're boring you at the beginning, you can just jump straight to the discussion. So to kick it off, we got some news items here to go over. First off, Frieren is back. It didn't seem like it was gone for that long.
It was a very short hiatus.
But it was apparently 2 months.
it was on hiatus.
So.
Okay, the way you spoke about it, it seemed like it was going to be like for the foreseeable future.
Well, that's what I thought.
The foreseeable future was 2 months.
I thought that it was going to be until like the anime came out, But no, it's back already, which I am very happy about.
Oh.
Another thing I'm very happy about, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2
Woo!
got its release date. Anybody want to have a guess?
I want to say I saw an article that said August, even though I thought originally it was April, but I might have just mixed up my A months.
I watched the trailer, so I should know this. I want to say April, but I feel like I'm confusing it with something.
July 6th.
Ha! Close enough. In the betweens.
Well, since you guys are so hyped about April, I've got a pretty big list here of April release dates. So I'm going to go over these. These are all ones that we, the Weeb Cabal, are connected to in some way.
Oh.
It's not every single release
that's
coming out. But so to start off, April 1st. This is not a joke.
So you're pulling my leg?
The Dangers in My Heart.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, this is that's an manga that I read. I'm using my superpower to manifest animes. It's like a slice of life high school kind of thing. It's incredibly cute. So I'm going to check that out. Next is The Aristocrat's Otherworldly Adventure, Serving Gods Who Go Too Far.
Oh, wow. That is... There's a lot going on there.
Title.
Yeah, that's on the second. I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast, but this is one where the girls get into his harem by just like declaring it themselves. We were talking about, I don't think this was on the podcast, but Kermit, I was talking to you about it, how it pissed me off because all the girls get mad at him when another girl is like, I'm going to be his wife. And it's like, he doesn't have any say in it.
He's a victim in all this. Really.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But as you can guess from the title, it's the gods' faults. So, In Another World with My Smartphone, Season 2, coming April 3rd.
It seems like I haven't watched it. I don't know anything about it. That just seems like such a strange premise.
Oh,
Is it?
It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me in the vein of like Dr. Stone. I know it's not going to be done as well, where it's just like, what if you were in another world, but you just had your smartphone, and despite the fact that you were in a place that had Wi-Fi towers or satellites, it just did what smartphones did.
Yeah. Except it then does way more than smartphones
Okay,
do.
then now I'm not interested anymore.
At one point, he uses it to target all of the enemies in order to cast magic to destroy all the enemies at the same time.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
To each their own.
I enjoy it.
Some of us are more excited for it than others.
Speaking of Dr. Stone Season 3.
It's the pirate one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
Who
so.
knows if we'll watch it?
April 6th.
Wait.
That's coming.
Did that not already come out?
No. The movie.
Oh, okay. That's
Is
what
the
I'm
movie a
thinking
pirate
of.
adventure? What's the movie?
I think the movie is about them getting together to start the pirate adventure.
Okay, because I could have sworn season 2 ends with them getting ready to get on a boat and them all in nice outfits.
Maybe we'll watch that. Who knows?
We'll point our eyeballs at it, and then I'll throw a hissy fit, I'm sure.
The Ancient Magus Bride, season 2. Does anybody know what that is?
I'm actually interested in that. I've seen the manga. I own the manga of it, as it turns out. I've never read it.
Never read it.
I think my wife might have bought it. I'm not sure.
I really like it. I think it's a great series.
But yeah, I was interested in that one.
I feel like that was one that you told me about in our very, very early days because that name is in my head, but there's no other information stored under that file besides remembering of being in the office.
I'm not sure when I'm actually going to watch it, though, because there's like 2 or 3 OVAs that I haven't watched that I need to. So we'll see when we get to that. I got a cheat skill in another world and became unrivaled in the real world too.
What?
April 6th. That's the one that I was talking to you about the guy who finds like a door in the back of his dead grandpa's house.
Okay.
And he goes and he like gets really... So he starts off, he's fat, right? And he saves this girl. Everybody hates him, except he saves this girl and she's like, oh, he's great. And then he goes to this other world.
Can auditorily hear me rolling my eyes.
He gets all buff and everything, and then he comes back because it's a door. He can just go back and forth. And so now everybody's like, oh, he's so great and everything. You know how it goes.
I know how
he
it
meets
goes.
a fawn named Mr. Tumnus. Jesus is there, but he's a lion.
That's actually.
That's what I was...
I like the manga. I'm not so sure about the anime. I saw some of the visuals and I'm like,
It's an isekai, and we sure put it out into the world.
That might be this season's shovelware isekai, unfortunately.
I'm sure there's going to be more than one. Don't worry, people. If you'd like shovels full of isekai, my little scrolling told me there's still more of them.
It's the spring of isekai.
Mashal.
Mashal!
April
Yay.
7th.
I also care about Mashal.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, these dates might be the original air dates, like in Japan, because Mashal says April 7th, but I want to say that Crunchyroll said the 9th. So these days might be a couple days ahead from when us Westerners can get access to stuff.
I'm sure we'll get them in lickety-split.
I'm interested in Mashal, but like, man, those trailers
don't get it, and I don't know if it's trying to save the joke. Like, we're going to watch Mashal. We're going to watch as much of season 1 until we go, this is working or this isn't working. But like right now, it looks like it has production values, but it also just doesn't look like it gets it.
Well, like
it's making me nervous.
I like the trailers, but I don't think they sell the show at all.
That's what I'm saying. They're not like bad. It's not like, man, this is a bad trailer. It's just like, I don't think you guys know what this is or that you got it in the way that we got it. And that's what makes me... But like, again, I don't know if this is like a kind of bait and switch where it's like, come for the Harry Potter, stay for punching wizards.
I'm also not really sold on the visuals.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think we haven't seen it in like motion yet.
It doesn't blow me away, but I mean, that's how I figured a Mashal anime.
Yeah, Mashal, you save all your things for when he's actually doing the stuff, and not the interstitials. You freaking cut that budget down.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. I'm excited to see it.
Summon to Another World again.
Oh my gosh, I can see why you said this is its own time.
April 8th. So Summon to Another World again. I mean, it's exactly what it says in the title. The guy was isekai'd. He saves the world. He makes friends with everybody.
He's re-isekai'd.
He gets re-isekai'd, and then he gets re-isekai'd.
I don't want to say that one.
We need another word for that now.
Yeah. But that's when I read. I enjoy the manga. I have a feeling that's going to be another shovelware isekai. There's got to be at least 2 a season, right? Demon Slayer, April 9th.
I talked about the movie last episode, didn't I? Or have I not done that yet?
Did we talk about the movie?
I don't remember if we talked about it on the podcast.
I don't think it had happened yet.
Let's take a short intermission here to talk about the insult that was the Demon Slayer movie.
I was the one that experienced it. So I went to go see the Demon Slayer quote-unquote movie, quote-unquote, with some other friends that were also watching Demon Slayer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this will be a little movie that'll like either be the start of the next one. Like, I thought this was going to be Demon Train again. It's not. You get a short version of a nicely edited version of like, hey, here's the story so far, except it's not, because they skip over like all of Spider completely. You just get a little bit of Demon Train. And then you end in literally, and I say literally as in like actual. This actual happened. This is not hyperbole. This is not me being facetious or joking. Literally the last 2 episodes of the last season of The Pleasure District. There is no editing. You will literally get the OP when it happens. You get the credits both times. You get commercial break moments. It is literally 2 episodes put back to back. And it's miserable. And I hate those episodes because the last episode is just the flashback for the 2 villains, which I despised the first time, and you better believe when I'm in the theater, knowing I'm stuck on this ride for a while, watching a thing that I didn't like the first time, but I'm not in my own home, so I can't just yell at it. And then I get the little light where I get like an extended episode that is the first episode of the next season of them going to, the Swordsmith's Village?
Mm-hmm.
And if that was not good, I probably would have rioted. I actually had a good time with it. I always forget when we have these really long, brutal fights in Demon Slayer how much Demon Slayer is funny and charming and personable when it gets to be. And there was a lot of moments that like genuinely made me laugh a lot, and I had a really good time. So, I mean, obviously it's out of theaters by the time you're hearing this. Like, obviously don't go see that. You've already seen it. But the new season so far, looking good. Excited to watch it.
Still such an insult.
I know. I'm like, dude, you were like the moment of just like, I can't just riff on this. I'm in a movie theater, even though there's only like 3 other people in the theater besides us. Like, they had a lot better time than I did, so it's probably a good idea that I didn't try to start heckling.
And they charged you a full movie ticket price for that.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep.
I bet in Japan they had like toys or something they handed out with the ticket.
You know, like, and genuinely, here, sorry to sidebar more, I literally would have been happy paying the same exact price if you gave me a really like edited down version of like, here's all that's happened to this moment, and then just right into the start to that first episode of the new season. And it would have been probably 30 minutes or more or less, and I would have been completely content. I would have been fine with that. I had a good time. It's fun to go out and see these things in movie theaters with people. Like, I'm here for the gimmick of it. It's just the fact that I had to sit through things that I'd already seen that I didn't like the first time, and that I was stuck with it with no editing. I saw the entire credits for the entire thing played twice, once after the end of the Pleasure District thing, and then again after the first episode of the story. Yeah, not good.
You know,
really lame after other really good anime things I've seen in theaters.
The first couple episodes of the last season were literally the train.
Yeah, it's literally the Mugen Train. Except if you didn't go see the movie, which like I get it.
There was stuff cut out. It wasn't like exactly the same. If they had done that, I would have been like, okay, whatever. Like, because the movie was actually good.
The movie was good, and it was what happened next.
Right. There was
it
stuff
was something
in it.
new. It was worthwhile.
Now, I think we did skip the first couple episodes because of that.
We had seen the movie.
But that was at least like, oh, they put some effort into this. The way you describe
this is a cash-in. This is literally a cash-in preview, and if it was just the preview,
what were they thinking?
I don't know.
They were thinking it's popular enough that people
just give me the new episode. There's no reason to do the last 2.
They probably had something.
Because if you don't know Demon Slayer, you're confused as heck why everybody's half dead. You're in a giant burned village. I don't know who these 2 villains are that see, like, you don't know. Like, you're not going to learn anything to make any of it make sense. Like, this is not somewhere that you can get on board or, like, get caught up to speed enough to know what's going on. It's the last 2 episodes of the last season. You will not know what's going on if you haven't been watching Demon Slayer.
It's almost like the
I don't get it.
The Demon Train movie worked, and so they were like, oh, we have to put a movie in between seasons, but there wasn't enough time to actually make a movie, and so some executive was just like, well, the Demon Train was 3 episodes.
The first 3 episodes of the new season. That would have been fine too. I had a really good time. Like, as soon as we got to the new footage, I came out being a lot happier because I had a good time with it. Okay, we've spent too much time on this.
Okay.
You'll be excited when Demon Slayer comes out. It's good.
Well, one more thing to mention that's coming out very soon, which is Konosuba. You didn't even know that was coming out.
That's what it's called, Konosuba.
No, it's actually called An Explosion on This Wonderful World.
Oh, that means it's a different thing, isn't it?
What?
Konosuba is like the first...
each season has a different
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. There's no exact date for that for some reason, but it's April.
Beware.
So
Bewarb.
I'm going to watch it.
Okay, have fun. Tell me about it. Report back.
All right, one more intermission. This is not something that's a release date, but go for it, Carmen.
So it did come out recently for purchase after it was in theaters. I saw, and also Ben saw, though separately, the movie Dragon Ball Super: Superhero, which semi-recently came out. I just want to say, if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, go check it out. It is a delight. It's really funny. I saw the dub at least. Can't speak to the sub. It moves really well. It has a lot of like acknowledging of old Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z stuff without feeling too like reliant on your nostalgia, but it feels like it rewards it without depending on it a lot of the time, though you should probably know what's going on with Dragon Ball. I love the new animation style. I think the fights look very dynamic. They're having a really good time with it. It's any fight where you can feel the joy of what's going on, of the people making it, or at least I think I can feel it. It's a good time. It reminded me a lot of... I did recently reconsume original Dragon Ball through a combination of the manga and the anime. And the anime had, like, back before we had all these crazy, like, flight and crazy other beam attacks and all this stuff, some, like, really well choreographed fights that were very exciting, even though this is, like, old animation from, like, the 70s and 80s.
No, it's that cel-shaded CG, right?
Yeah.
It looked better than I thought it would.
I think it looks and moves really well.
Well, that's like the one new Toriyama game that's going to be coming out that we were watching the trailer for.
No, it's a movie, wasn't it? Sandland?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
It looks good. There's something about it that
holds you back.
I don't know.
Thought so. I'll put it this way: like with Trigun, I'm aware of that animation style the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And though I do like the new Trigun, it would be better if it didn't have that. This faded into the background for me really quick.
Yeah, except in those moments where there's a fight and the camera's like swinging around and following things, and it looks incredible pretty much the whole time.
Things that they can't really do with hand-drawn
They can't
animation.
do easily. They can't do affordably.
I guess I'm just gonna have to get over it at some point.
I think if you watch it, like, so from the trailers, it was very distracting in the trailers. Sitting down and watching the movie, I forgot about it.
Yeah, likewise. There was a couple times where... And I think they mesh it in really well, because I'm sure there's some 2D drawn-in things where it's like, there's no point to make an entire rigged character model for this little cameo or something. I thought it was really good. It was really funny. It rewarded me for having consumed the original Dragon Ball. Yeah, so like if you were at all a fan of Dragon Ball Z, any of that, I would say go check it out. I believe right now you can only purchase it. I bought the Blu-ray from Amazon. I was going to just send it back or try to resell it, but I've enjoyed it enough that it deserves to be on my shelf.
It's available on YouTube
for purchase, though. It's not for rental yet.
Yeah,
I don't know if and where it'll be rental. People speculate Crunchyroll because they have the other Dragon stuff. I don't know. The future will tell. But right now, even just for buying it, I would say it's worth it. I think very happy with the money I spent on it.
$10 on YouTube sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I would say, again, if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, worth your while. Really good time.
I wonder how much, like, time/money they actually save by doing it CG.
I mean, admittedly, they said this one was going to be more experimental, and I think it paid off. I just want it to almost always look like this now, because new Dragon Ball, I already know, like, new Dragon Ball animation 2D doesn't look right to me, because I grew up with Dragon Ball Z from the 90s, and that's what Dragon Ball looks like to me. Or even going earlier to literal Dragon Ball. So, like, the new stuff never looks right to me. It's like new Simpsons, you know?
Yeah.
It's fine. It's good. It just doesn't... That's not what my brain says those look like. But this CG style captures it well.
I preferred the animation in the Broly, the most recent Broly movie. But Dragon Ball Super, the TV show, looks like shit. I mean, it's really embarrassing how bad it is at some points. Mm-hmm. And so... If I would take this as a compromise for sure, but I don't think they probably saved any money. I think they probably spent as much because they pushed it.
If they spent, as much,
Brad, this is a hill that you're going to have to get over.
No, I understand.
There's
but
no fighting it.
What I'm saying is, if this one was an experiment and future ones will be cheaper, then it makes sense to me. But if it's always as much as it would be if you did regular animation, I don't understand why you would do it.
Because it's the future. It's what's coming. You can do different things.
Yeah.
And now they're understanding it both in Japan and in the West and whatever, that you can put 2D and 3D together to create incredible things and use the strength of both of them. And I think this is just going to be an old man shouts at cloud until you get used to that the cloud is 3D instead of 2D. Like
I hate that cloud.
You can't stand in the way of this. I'm sure you can find something that you could say that to me and I'd get really upset about, but this is one where it's like, especially now where like once freaking, I mean, I know they were working on it before then, but it's like once, I guess the twin things, at least in my mind, of like Guilty Gear Xrd, and then into Strive, and freaking Spider-Verse, like those are the 1-2 punch of like, we're in it now. This is the new era of CG animation,
see,
and you're going to have to get used to it.
Those make sense to me because they're using it to make a specific style that would be difficult to do hand drawn.
Well, no, but Guilty Gear has been always hand drawn until they did it and they pioneered it.
I was talking about Spider-Man.
It's the same sort of ballpark of CG that 3D that looks 2D ish. Like Guilty Gear is the ultimate thing of like literally the team that made Guilty Gear used the same concept to make Dragon Ball Z Fighters. And I think that looks great too. This is another time.
If anybody's actually still listening to this, if you have a CG anime you think would change my mind, let me know.
I think honestly, if you had any interest in Dragon Ball Super at all,
I don't.
So that's the first hurdle. If you
watch clips on YouTube. That's as much as you're going to get out of me.
If you did, give it a shot because the trailer didn't do it justice. Like, I thought the trailer looked bad, but I thought the movie looked great.
Well, when I start seeing clips of it on YouTube, I'll let you know.
I mean, that's what got me to watch it, so.
All right. So.
I'm glad you skipped all of that, listener.
Now we're done with the specific series stuff that we're talking about. So we got a couple shout outs.
Oh, no. There's more?
I told you this intro was going to be long.
It's already long. I'm going to shut up.
So first off, I want to shout out Whitlash and Moon. So we had our first guests on heroin addiction the last episode. Whitlash and Moon, they're from the r/Otome Isekai subreddit. And we had a lot of fun recording with them. We did Master Villainous the Invincible, and apparently we didn't even have to recommend it to Kermit.
No, you already talked about it to me. I haven't listened to that episode.
I give it a soft recommendation.
Because it was recommended to me, and I just haven't gotten around to it. Because I don't have the opening is coming soon.
Yeah, it was really fun talking to people who are passionate about it, and
yeah,
I mean, it might have been fun for you talking to somebody who actually knows what all the references are.
No, I had a good time. It's, there's a couple things where they had different perspective from me, so it was good to have someone who was immersed in it that had a different perspective rather than just,
the newcomer.
I'll say outsider, but you're quickly becoming an insider.
I'm getting into I'm getting into the web novels.
Yeah,
I've gone too deep now.
Next, I want to shout out Rena again. So I think hands down, Rena is our biggest fan. So she commented on 2 other episodes again. So I want to say thank you, because that's what we keep asking people for, and she's the only one who does it.
Thank you. Not the only one, but yeah.
Basically. Well, I say that, but there is actually...
Exactly. Yeah. Gotcha. Got him. Got-y.
So Jack-O-Lantern, Jack-O-Lantern commented on one of our YouTube videos. In fact, it was the Review Stravaganza episode.
Wow. Kicking it old school.
Yeah, that was a couple months ago that he posted. Why do I keep doing that? I think it's probably a guy, but you know how it is. They actually recommended a series to us in that comment.
Oh.
One that I actually am already reading.
Of course.
Yep.
But I will be talking about that series on our next episode, which is Review Stravaganza 2.
Too Stravaganza.
Too Stravaganza, too fast.
Stravaganza.
Too Fast, Too Stravaganza.
Ooh, that's it.
Yep.
That's the one. Write that one down.
One more shout out to Tree. from the Shonen
They
Flop
grow
Discord.
outside. They give us oxygen from our carbon.
No, that would be trees.
Okay.
This is a singular tree.
Gotcha.
And they recommended a non-romance isekai manhwa for me to check out, which I will at some point. Don't know when that's going to happen, but thank you. They said that they were listening to our episodes and had that recommendation. So
Rad.
thanks for shouting us out there. Okay, so one last thing. Oh my gosh. This actually might be a little long. This is sort of a shout out, but it's also something that we need to just sort of address. So we're gonna bring it down. Bring it down.
We spent a lot of time doing paperwork, and now we're going to bring the energy down before we've gotten to...
So a couple of weeks ago, I got a message on our Facebook. Matthew messaged me to let me know that he was upset. So if anybody remembers, hopefully everybody does, and listen to our episodes, plural, on Ranking of Kings. You'll remember that we had some very strong feelings about... It's not...
I'm not laughing. I'm laughing with you.
We had some pretty strong feelings about the representation that they did with Boji.
Boji.
More specifically,
What a name.
we went pretty hard on the sound design, voice acting of Boji.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's safe to say, and I'm pretty sure we went over this in the episode, although I haven't gone back and listened to it, that throughout our experiences in life, meeting multiple deaf people, we had never heard a deaf person act like that. And we thought it was somewhat insulting.
Also, it got on our nerves. I don't want to be too golden boys about that. I do believe we found it very grating and compared it to a baby crying.
Well, unfortunately, we were wrong. Matthew was upset because he used to work with a deaf man who did sound basically just like that. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes here to air this out. I talked to Matthew about it. We went back and forth. We came to a cordial resolution, but I wanted to make sure that I brought this up in case anybody else was listening who had some bad feelings about that. We did not intend to make fun of anybody. As I said, we have never had that experience, and so it felt to us, watching it, that it wasn't correct, but turns out some deaf people do sound like that.
There you go.
So
Our world picture has gotten a little bit bigger.
So we were talking a while back, I think it was the Origins episode,
Yep, that sounds right.
about how all of us sort of got into the different anime and stuff that really was sort of formative in our early years. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about had a lot of overlap. There are things like Naruto and Bleach and Full Metal Alchemist and all these anime that we've all seen, we've all at least heard of, fairly regularly when we were younger. And it got me thinking, because these days, as I'm out in these communities, Shonen Flop, for example, I'm talking to these people and I'm seeing what they're saying, and people bring up all of these different series, be it manga or anime, and half of them I have no idea what they are. And it's a little baffling to me because I consume so much stuff that there's a part of me that goes, how do things exist out there that I don't even know of? But it got me thinking. I think there was a time earlier in our lives where everybody sort of was in the same track. The media that you saw was the same as the media everybody else saw, because there were only, 40 channels on TV and there's barely any internet, and to get books you had to go to a bookstore. And it seems like in the past couple years, 10, 15 years, but still, there's been this explosion where you no longer have the monolith of entertainment anymore. It's so much more splintered.
So some of this topic came from our origins because of the way I want to kind of spearhead this is how technology has changed that over time. That in the beginning, much like Brad described, you had the channels that were on TV and they played when they played, and if you weren't there for it, you missed it. If you were lucky, you got like a VHS tape. We don't really have DVDs. The internet's in its like infancy, so like maybe you can torrent something if you're in like the 2000s at that point or something. And I feel like that lack of accessibility made it so what was there became more of a thing. When you say, I want this of this anime thing, you're willing to take on things that are maybe a little bit outside of your normal thing that you would go to find. And, if you're freaking a stereotypical boy growing up, you're like, I want Dragon Ball Z. That's what I like to watch. But, like, Sailor Moon's on before or after it. And you're like, okay, I'll watch that because it's in the same time slot. But because it's all that you have, it becomes the quote-unquote the canon of what being into anime is.
Right.
And I feel like with our increase in technology, where there is just such easy access, because it's like, I don't know how much anime was coming out in Japan at that time in the 90s. Some of the stuff we were getting was years old. That's just how it worked. That maybe that wasn't the case over there as much, and that just because like these things, like your Sailor Moons, like your Inuyashas, like your Dragon Balls, like your why can't I think of the name ever? It's got the big purple and green robot, and Shinji has to get in it.
Evangelion.
Like Evangelion, Cowboy Bebop. That there were these the Trigun. Like these were the things that people knew about, that they talked about, and they were like held up and venerated as the anime canon. And that kind of just, because there's just so much of it and it's just so readily available, that's like quickly disintegrating. And like the waters of the river of anime are moving so fast that it's like very rare for things to stick around past the season they come out, unless they're like really long running, and even then usually it's only the tent poles. I don't know. I just think I don't want to make this too much like Old Man Yells at Cloud of like, it's not like it was when I grew up, because it's really easy to fall into that. So I think this is me trying to figure out maybe more specifically a little bit of detective work of what it was and what it is now.
I think there's like a bigger picture to this as well. If you think back to like earlier times beyond, anime and manga and stuff, where there was like the culture that basically everybody was in, and then you had these tiny little splinters. You had your punks, right? Or your greasers, and those were tiny little groups that were like, oh, we're outside of this main culture. But for the most part, most people were in this.
There wasn't enough culture to 100% cater to those splinters that you could live in them, in those bubbles.
And it seems like as society has progressed, as technology has progressed, it's so much easier to sort of live in that bubble now, that you can get so granular with it and find a huge community of your very specific thing, isekai. It's so different from the world our parents grew up in, if not our grandparents.
I mean, even the ones that we grew up in now, where it's just easy that there's not a shared experience of like when you meet another anime fan that you'll have an assured something in common.
Well, right, your shared experiences now tend to still be Cowboy Bebop, Naruto.
Are they?
Bleach. Well, I mean, if
for
you're
our
talking
people,
about
like for people our generation,
well, if you're talking about
moving forward, like
I mean, I can't really speak to kids these days.
I would say even people now in their like early to mid 20s, if not younger, I feel like is already outside of our scope.
I feel like those series are still so large that even if
you'd have heard of them, but you might not have seen them.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it's always weird to me when it's like, oh, somebody just hasn't consumed any Dragon Ball Z, and it's just like, I had no choice in the matter. I just did.
There's a couple weird examples. Like, how many... I think everybody of a certain age who's an anime fan watched Gundam Wing.
I never did.
I've
never seen any Gundam.
You had to be watching, like, Toonami after school.
Maybe? Is that the one where they're like chibi?
No.
Okay.
That's Gundam SD Super Deformed.
Where did I...
Is that really what it's called? Is that what it stands for?
That's what, chibi is also called.
Super Deformed?
You know what?
Oh my gosh.
I don't remember where I watched G Gundam.
G Gundam was probably on... It was on Toonami for a while.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that was one... Like, I don't know that very many people actually know that one.
The most racist Gundam of them all.
Well...
Or the least culturally sensitive Gundam of them all.
Yeah, you can say that. That's fine.
It was Gundam stereotypes. But yeah, like those are series that I think in Japan no one remembers. Like by and large, they're not the most popular Gundam series, but most people's first exposure in America to Gundam was Gundam Wing. And then after Gundam Wing was successful, and I think Gundam Wing just happened to be like the Gundam that was big around that time. So they're like, yeah, bring Gundam over. And then eventually they brought over the original Mobile Suit Gundam, which is a huge thing in Japan. And there's a few other weird series like that are like really important in America, but no one in Japan really cares about. But there's another one I remember... you guys ever read or watch Saint Seiya or...
I'm aware of it. That always felt like something that was like somehow one generation before mine. Like it's always like it's in a bunch of like the Shonen Jump, like here everybody battler games. But I never know what any of them are, and I've never seen the manga, and I know nothing about it.
I can't remember if it was also published as Knights of the Zodiac or if that was something else.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
All of those names sound familiar to me, but I cannot place them at all.
Exactly. There's a file for them in my brain, but the file is empty. It's just a named file.
The weird thing is, what I've heard, I obviously wasn't there, but around the same time I would have been getting into anime, the people in South America got Saint Seiya. Like, somebody did a big Latin America, I think Spanish language interpretation or dub of Saint Seiya, and so that became a huge show in South America, and it's like one of the bigger anime down there that people remember, like Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is pretty popular around the world, but like maybe like a Gundam Wing or something.
It was just because it was what they had, and it was done well, at least as far as anybody knew at the time.
It was on TV, like...
Yeah, it was on TV consistently.
What I heard was back then, their original programming market wasn't very big for children's cartoons. Like, they weren't producing a lot of original stuff. And so that had an opportunity to, like, really take hold, because they got, like, a really solid cartoon. And so people got obsessed with it. But it never got as big over here. And that was a big disconnect between some of my Latin American friends and I.
So it's a cultural thing, not a time thing, because I always just assumed it was just one generation up, and that just for some reason, which is weird, because I was like growing up, I was very like keen on picking up what came before me, because that seemingly was how you were cool. And you could hang out with the older kids, and just I've never met anybody or seen anything about Saint Seiya, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely older, but like the thing is, so is Dragon Ball Z. I think Dragon Ball Z was...
Dragon Ball, I think, was, a lot of the ways...
Dragon Ball was like 1989 or something.
Yeah.
So like Dragon Ball Z was over years before I ever watched it.
Exactly.
And it was just literally, it got put on TV at a time when we were all watching the same channels. Like, when I was growing up, almost everybody that was my age turned on Cartoon Network.
Yep.
For at least some period of time.
After school, I still have memories of watching through the Boo Saga.
When you really
like that.
only had 3 choices for cartoons, really, like there was Cartoon Network, which to, just tell you how old I am, I remember when Cartoon Network started.
Yep.
And then, you had your Fox morning cartoons.
The Fox Box.
And there was also
where Ultimate Muscle played.
Was
and
it,
One Piece for kids.
Was it ABC that had cartoons? There was another.
There were
Nickelodeon had cartoons.
Well, right,
Yeah,
Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon
Disney had their channel.
The Disney Channel didn't start until I was.
Yeah.
Disney had a channel by the time Cartoon Network was rocking and bopping. I'm pretty sure about that.
Disney had a channel, but it wasn't part of like most cable packages.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get. I think we got like 60 channels when I was a kid or something like that.
But I want to say the other big network channel that did like Saturday morning cartoons didn't get any anime.
That is weird that anime was a lot of that, because like I definitely remember like Pokemon and Digimon being a thing that like we taped while I was at soccer practice for some reason.
Yeah.
On a Saturday morning, and then again later like the Fox Box of like watching One Piece and Ultimate Muscle and stuff like that. I'm flashing back a little bit. This is partly what this episode's supposed to be, is a lens looking back of like how technology has changed things. It's like, can you imagine where it's like, could you imagine now missing an episode of something?
Right.
You can't do it. That's not how it works. Like,
if I can't watch an episode of something, I stop watching that series.
yeah, but like imagine there's just a hole in the middle that just like, oh, I had families coming over. We have a thing. We have tickets to something. You're just going to miss this episode in the middle, and just you might never see that because you have no power to come. You have to wait if and when it comes back around, and you just had to infer a bunch of stuff.
I was watching
about
Dragon Ball Z for years before I even knew what the first episode was.
Exactly, like that. You can come in like there's a certain like even outside of anime, I think that just as a concept is like dead, because it's like in streaming, it's like, well, you start at the beginning, and if it's season 2 that's on the streaming platform and not season 1, you've never seen it, you just don't touch it. But like we didn't do that. I want to not just say constantly back in the day. This is me trying to put on my archaeologist historian hat and not my old man shouts at cloud hat, because it's not like this was a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing that was. But just like that, you just had to on the fly go, who are these people? I mean, see big thing. I mean, I did it then because I only learned about him recently in context of like Tien and Dragon Ball Z. I don't know what his deal is. I don't know what freaking Chiaotzu's deal is. I don't know. They're just there. They have a backstory, but I've never learned it. Like, I don't think I ever explicitly saw like the first episode of Dragon Ball Z and knew that's what I was seeing. I just sort of you just kind of learn to osmosis things and try to get a sense of like what was going on and who is who to the best of your ability.
I can't say this for certain, but I have this recollection that the first episode of Dragon Ball Z I ever saw was when Goku was in Hiffle. Which is like,
that's an opener, my dude.
Imagine like watching that. I mean, and I was a child.
Yeah,
it was a cartoon. It was like, put it in my brain.
Exactly. Same.
But like, no idea what's happening here.
Well, and at the time, it was strange for cartoons to be organized in a sequential way.
Yeah, that was
like,
just a thing. Like the West just didn't really do that because we just played them in syndication.
A lot of them were really episodic, so it didn't matter so much. If you think about like the older Cartoon Network original shows,
That's a lot of, but like anime wasn't. I think that's what made anime so weird and special to us, is that things changed over time. If you saw an episode later, you'd go, like, who's that? What's going on? And I feel like you don't have that. You didn't have that with like, I'm watching Johnny Bravo or like Powerpuff Girls, and that makes me Doug,
or even like Spider-Man or X-Men. I mean, they had multi-part episodes, and they did progress things, but for the most part, they did write it very specifically so that you could start at any point.
Yeah.
That you could just watch an episode. Like, I'd be so curious to try to watch something like that now. And I think even more so, like, I don't think you can. Or, I mean, well, I guess you can. We did it back in the day, but it's just, I'd be curious to be what that would feel like, because, like, I haven't done that in a really long time, and I still feel like I have some of that old muscle of, like, okay, what's going on? Who's this? Who's that? Ask my questions. Try to, like, feel things out.
I feel like the those older shows, the non-anime, like they very explicitly, Like when it was a 2-parter, it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, and I have to make sure I watch next week to catch the second part. But otherwise, it didn't matter at all. And it almost feels like when the American network executives brought the anime over, they just they couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that things happened in order.
I mean,
and
that
so you
wasn't
had
a thing
that
was
thing.
cartoon. Like, freaking still, like, American or Western production orders are out of order. Things don't always even come out in the order that they were supposed to.
Yeah.
Still, now. That happened to, like, Owl House or something.
You remember, like, when original Dragon Ball was airing, they would air, like a couple episodes and then the new one.
Yeah, they were all out of sync.
And they weren't always the episodes that came right before it.
Or you'd get stuck in a loop, like the beginning of Dragon Ball up to, like, maybe Muscle Tower. And, like, I saw a bunch of Dragon Ball, but I somehow never got beyond that. I never met Tien. I never got to the second tournament of power. I was always excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Bacterian fight's happening again. And I never knew there was another tournament. And just the weird way that you, like, what information you did take in. Or, like, you played a video game and it had characters that you had, like, never met in.
I can't imagine something like that happening today.
It doesn't. It hasn't happened for a decade.
Those executives would get ripped apart.
Well, they used to dub Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z 4 episodes at a time. Like, they'd dub it, they'd put out the VHS, and then they'd keep going. And then eventually, when the whole thing had been dubbed, or sometimes not even. Sometimes they would just air what they had. But then sometimes they'd wait until the whole season.
But that was the thing. It was like a Wild West where they could just go, you air however many episodes you have, and then maybe you have the new one, or maybe you just go around the horn and you do it again, because that was just what television was.
Well, and the only reason I think anime even came over in the first place was sort of the same reason that, like, they were doing Saint Seiya in Latin America was... I got 200 episodes ready to go.
Here's a lot of content, and it's cheap, and all you got to do is talk over it, and then it's done. Nobody's got to be paid to animate it. That's already been paid. You just pay your little fee to get it there.
Yep.
Because nobody knows anything, because it's the 80s or the 70s, and the internet's not a thing.
Yeah, and they're like, if it occupies a time slot, and it did not get the good time slots for a very long time.
But you can see how this builds. We have not actually used the word yet, but and I'm going to put this in the biggest auditory finger quotes, whatever, air quotes, monoculture, at least as the term that I know it, of the monoculture. These are the things that we generally don't know because we generally don't have the ability to find other things. So when you find those little small things, they're hard to find. They're not the main thing. We're not all kind of warped into the same thing. We're kind of all off on our splinters, which is, I think, I'm gonna try to be forward thinking and say that is good, that you have more of a choice over what you want to take in.
Oh yeah.
Are there times that's a bummer because you won't find things that you wouldn't normally go out of your way to find? Yeah. I mean, these are any system change is going to have its pros and cons. I think it's generally better that people get to choose a little bit more what they're looking for, and that dictates what gets made.
I think monoculture has a negative connotation. It sounds limiting. But
yeah, I think it is.
But I think
that's why it's not an entirely glowing look backwards.
It's
maybe
not necessarily
rephrase
bad,
it though.
But it is limiting.
To rephrase it though, I think it would be like we're losing a common ground. Like, you used to, if you met somebody and you're like, I like anime, you like anime, you would have something to talk about.
Yeah.
Because you were likely to have at least one show in commman.
This feels like a pop culture talk zone episode because we're getting outside of anime.
It applies to a lot of things. I mean,
yeah, but like that's the drawback of the quote unquote death of the quote unquote monoculture is that common ground is disintegrating more and more because everybody's off in their little their splinters.
I'm gonna have to disagree because I think that it's a good thing that you have less common ground. From my perspective, as someone who likes to collect information, if I meet someone else and I'm like, oh, I like anime, you like anime, and then they talk about the anime that they like that I've never heard of before, they give me all this new information. That seems so much more like a good conversation to me than just going back and forth about, oh, we both like Dragon Ball. That's cool.
But I think it's the common ground it's forming that common ground that you know what the other one's about. And if it's just a dead thing, it's like there's so much anime that exists that people can know about anime that you've never heard of that you wouldn't like because what you're looking at and what you want out of it is different. I've learned this via watching anime with you guys and watching anime for a time with my little derby group, where it's just like my tastes and their tastes do not mesh. Like that, like it's that feeling of like, if I come across anime fans where I don't have things in common with them, like that learning that I didn't innately have something in common with them because we both liked anime. Because it's so big now that, I mean, even back then, but we didn't know it as much, like, you can be here for different reasons. Anime fans are kind of a dime a dozen on the internet. You can find them. There's a lot of them. A lot of them are trash. I'm going to come out and say that right now, at least to my, now more elder statesman viewpoint. And by and large, I don't want to talk to them. That's why I have a podcast, that I get to hear my own voice and talk to you guys.
I have had the experience, maybe you guys have too, of working in a place where I was not only the only white person, I was the only native English speaker in the entire office. And it's really cool. I love learning about other cultures. I love learning languages. Some of those people are like my best friends to this day. But you do have this weird moment, and this is where it's more of like a general culture thing of like, when you do meet another native English speaker in the office, you're like, oh my God, you know what a McRib is. And
I'm laughing, but you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
You bond over that experience. It's just, there's just little things you don't realize you miss until they're gone. And,
that's interesting because, so first of all, I have never had that experience. I've worked with plenty of English as a second language people. I feel like I'm always able to find some common ground.
It's not that there's no common ground, but there's certain things that you're used to being common ground that you're in a situation where it becomes not common ground. I think that's the thing with the anime fan growing up, is like, it's a rare thing that might happen. And like, I was lucky that like, I had friends that we were all watching Pokemon and Digimon together week by week that I could like talk to them about it, but like, you're not necessarily guaranteed. Here's something with the monoculture kind of dying out with the internet. Well, I mean, that's more the internet coming up with this whole technology side, is like, there is an abundance of people to talk about any of these things. You can go online, you can Google it, you will almost assuredly find a Reddit or some sort of a Twitter area or a Discord or a phone post. Like, there will be a space. If you want to talk about a thing that you like, there is a clearly easily found space for it, which was not a thing before. There's no individual tent for any particular show that's big enough, so you just have the big anime convention tent or something like that. This is something, the world of this is small enough, and there's a few enough number of us that forms our collective identity, because there's not a lot of us and there's not a lot of it. And then as both of those things got bigger, it didn't become as unifying, which is like any big group of people. It gets big enough, it doesn't become as holding up together.
It's easier to like bubble off. It's easier to go into
Splinter.
Like,
I like using Splinter over Bubble, because Bubble usually has negative connotations that like you're actively not listening to the rest of things.
Well, I think,
but maybe there is.
Yeah,
See, I'm trying to be too nice.
I do want to use the analogy of Bubbles, because I feel like a very soapy individual.
Okay. Is this a Notomi Isekai?
Well, it's where I'm able to assimilate into very many different bubbles.
Yeah. Well, so like, I wouldn't argue for going back.
No.
Like, I definitely enjoy having access to the stuff I really, really like. Back in the day of having to watch whatever is on television,
or having to pay $50 for 2 episodes that may or may be done really poorly.
Yeah, like, we had common ground not because we wanted it, but because we had to.
No, I think that's the key. Is like, for me, if I want to talk about something very specific, I can go on the internet, I can find that very specific subreddit or Discord or whatever it is, and I can talk about that thing that's very specific. But also, just in my day-to-day life, meeting new people, being at work, going out somewhere, meeting friends of friends, whatever it is, I can also talk to those people. The choice, I mean, in this, choice and variety is a thing that is very important to me, just in general. So I think that is the key for me. So when we talk about not having a monoculture anymore, especially in terms of anime and manga, it almost feels to me like that's the best possible way to have it, because you can have your very specific thing, but you still have the baseline of anime or manga. And like I said, when I meet that person who hates isekai, we can sit down and we can have a conversation, and I can collect all of their information, and I can maybe put some of my information out and go, you know, I understand why you don't like isekai, but here's some isekai you might actually like.
Well, I think there's a trade-off, and like I said, I wouldn't want to go back. I'm firmly in the camp of it's better now, but you do lose something when we don't all have the same like reference points.
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
and I think we've talked about this a little bit in other episodes, but I think that having the common ground of like anime in Japan, I'm not sure how much they view anime as different from just any cartoon. Or like I showed you guys the other day, like the word on the Shonen Jump website is komiksu. They don't call it manga there. I mean, it's just going to become
it is here what it is there, where it's not a common ground anymore. It just is a thing that is.
Yeah, they're all just comics.
It is in abundance. It is no longer just it's no longer a common ground.
It makes
which is
me
fine.
wonder, because like if you think about like, okay, so we have adult cartoons, right? You've got your Simpsons, you've got your Family Guy, you've got all of those ridiculous things on Adult Swim, right?
Yeah.
But then we also have cartoons for children. You might talk about Adventure Time or Owl House or the
DuckTales.
Yeah, like
Libya.
And if you talk to any one person and you're like, "Hey, do you like cartoons?" and they're like, "Oh yeah, I watch The Simpsons and South Park or whatever." Like, is that person, do they have an overlap? Will they go, "Oh, I also like Gravity Falls"?
They can, but by and large, if somebody comes up to me and describes that they watch Family Guy, the freaking Eminem "We Are Not Alike" starts playing in my brain. Unless they can cite other things. It's like, oh, I love animation. I watch Family Guy and South Park, and it's like, we're not the same. Like,
and so
stay away from me.
Can you take that same...
Not to say that they can't, or that we don't have other shared ground, but that is another thing that makes me feel a kinship with somebody.
Right. Can you take that same sort of line of thinking over to Japan and go, okay, this person watches Evangelion, right? Do they watch... I'm struggling to think of one that's more geared towards children.
Doraemon.
Yeah, Doraemon.
Sure.
Doraemon.
Yeah.
So, like, do those things overlap for them? Or
By and large.
in Japan,
I would guess not.
is the split more like, hey, there's live action stuff which adults watch, and then there's cartoons that children watch?
I think it's more like, do you watch a really depressing, edgy teenager mecha thing that's super weird? Like, I don't think most people in Japan have watched Evangelion. I don't think most people in Japan would like Evangelion, because most people wouldn't like Evangelion.
I don't like... most people in the States.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, I mean, it's a weird show.
Yeah.
And it has like all these cultish tones, and there's a lot of like deep Bible Kabbalah crap going on. And
I'm just going to interject. If you have not listened to the Tenacious D Evangelion crossover, look it up
tonight. We were already thinking about it.
Look it up on YouTube immediately. It
great.
is one of the best things ever created.
But I think for a while there, anime existed as something that it never was in Japan, in America.
Yeah.
I am going to be able to do something with that with our third segment. I have something that is very pertinent to that I'm going to save for later for the third segment. Foreshadowing.
Is it foreshadowing if you say it out loud?
Yes, I foreshadowed it right now. I was shadowy about it.
Foreshouting.
Foreshadowing. I do want to rewind a little bit, because something hit me that I had forgotten about, that you guys brought up, of just like Ben saying like, I don't want it to go back to what it was, and that it's like true shared nostalgia is born via struggle.
Okay.
Because unlike the things that we watched, our venues, the venues of which we got these things, should and will and should not come back. We have the shared nostalgia struggle of it was on TV. Like, we have a soft spot for it because that's how we grew up, that we think we want it back at moments, but we obviously, as we've stated, we like don't, where it's like that was how we took an anime, that it's like you had to be around every week. If you missed an episode, good luck until it maybe comes back around. And it's via that struggle. It's that thing of when we think about early internet, we think about the with the modem booting up when you're getting onto AOL. That shouldn't be back because technology has gone by that, but it is a shared nostalgia that you had to be there. And I think that's why it feels so, to Ben's point, I think, is like newer generations will not and should not have that sort of, like, they shouldn't have that in their bones because we've moved past that. That's not a thing anymore.
They'll have it in different ways, but like,
yeah, they'll have their own thing, but it won't literally be the ones that we feel in our bones because we grew up with that the whole like Toonami being this place that you went, and like that dubs were like garbage and ruined things with what they were talking about, or like all this edit, like that's just not present anymore, and the medium is better for it, but that is a thing that has gone by, that we can have. Maybe a soft spot isn't the right word for it, but we have like a felt memory, shared memory of that, like another generation won't and shouldn't.
So there was a lot of like gross stuff about that time, obviously. Like, I mean, not a very friendly space for women.
No.
Not a very friendly space for minorities.
No.
or anyone who was
LGBTQ? No.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Not great.
no. And now that it's expanded, now that there is a wider variety of material available,
Good.
yeah, and that's good.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you bring more people in, this is the debate like every nerd community has at some point of like, it's not special. It's not this special little secret we have anymore that makes us like, everybody knows what anime is now, for example.
It's diluted. Everybody is nerd, so being a nerd is dumb now because it's diluted. It's nothing.
So this thing it's
practically water.
We've talked about this a couple of times because Brad, like, you weren't there like for the anime as identity portion
of Ben.
No, and honestly, while you're sitting there talking about that, I'm like, nerds are the worst.
Yeah. There were cool things about it. Like, there were cool like spaces you could hang out in that will never come back. But if you went back in time, you'd realize that
it was all gross and terrible.
it was literally gate kept,
Yeah.
so that it could be
Meanwhile,
like that.
I'm just yesterday, I'm going around telling people like how everything is an isekai because I want to claim everything for myself.
And I don't want that to happen. Even though I helped with it at moments.
I want to inject that into every space so that I have a seat at every table.
Maybe you shouldn't sit at every table, Brad. Maybe you're not welcome at every table.
Well, that's the novelty part.
Maybe some tables should be special. Maybe I shouldn't be allowed at every table.
That's the part of my brain that's just like, I need novelty. Give it to me.
I need novelty. Let me consume the most repetitive, similar to itself genre that exists.
No,
currently.
but that's what I'm saying. It's in everything.
I need tiny novelty. I need novelty that doesn't challenge me.
Well, yeah.
I want familiar novelty.
There are people I never would have talked to if we hadn't had this one weird shared like secret interest in it.
There are people
you guys,
who
literally, we would never have talked if you hadn't seen my weed posters in my cube.
We were friends before that.
No, I never talked to you guys really. When we were friends, we weren't on the same project. I didn't interact with you guys on a daily basis.
No, we talked
until the
before
Weeb
that.
Cabal started forming. We were.
That was the
friends.
first time we hung out outside of work. For
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, that was meaningful.
It connected us more, but it wasn't the thing that introduced us.
Despite having, you were coworkers, and even that again, barely, because again, we didn't work on the same project. You were on the other end of the office.
All right,
we
Ben,
didn't interact.
we were friends before.
Yeah, you guys get to be friends. You guys worked on stuff
We're
together.
friends. I mean, like, it's fine, but like, we probably wouldn't have hung out outside of work.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I mean, since that, we've gone to like dinner, we've gone to movies. Like,
I guess props to anime because it, like, having a moment of genuineness. You guys are like my first and probably like only, despite having many jobs, my first and only work friends. People that I actively chose to spend time with outside of work, and then even all of us left to do different jobs. Like,
I have.
I don't have
Facebook
anybody
friends.
from jobs from before there. I probably, for my current job, there's nobody that I'm like, I want to stay in contact with this person. Like,
I have friends on Facebook who I've stayed in contact with on Facebook.
Yeah,
that I would
that's
consider friends, but we don't
they're
like
not
meet
this.
up. And I have
This is friendship.
I have one friend from a previous job who like I've been friends with for 12 years or whatever, and yeah.
But I do think there was, and this is pluses, and it has a lot of minuses. On the minuses, don't get me wrong, but like, especially when I was in high school, you could assume some things about a person's like personality by the fact that they liked anime.
That's actually something I like, that it's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, and it is better this way.
Correct.
For sure.
There are certain things, now it has to be more specific of like, oh, they're into these shows, and you can start kind of getting, again, not always true, but you can get a sense of people, not just from anime, but what they're watching.
But
I would say, you know, anybody who still has that idea in their head of like, oh, this is what an anime nerd is, they should listen to Kawaii Disappointment, because those three are so wholesome. They're great, and it's like, yes, this is like the antithesis of what an anime nerd used to be.
I'm giving like a charitable definition of like, I could assume certain things about like, they're not gonna think I'm weird. Now, I as a straight white guy got like, they would, if I were a woman, they would have related to me very differently in a way that I would not have liked. Yeah.
Let's not
So I would have assumed some negative things.
pull at our collars.
I was gonna say earlier that, like, you know, I'm sure there's people who we've all met and maybe even been friends, quote unquote, friends with, that we shouldn't have been because we had that shared connection.
Yeah. Oh no, I have been there. I have 1,000,000,000% been there. I've escaped that life. I have left that life behind.
And that's why I talk about how like I low-key broke up with the anime community like before we started doing this podcast.
And they just keep sucking me back in.
It was a thing that made sense to me because it gave you a shared common ground where it's like, I don't know what to talk to you about, so I will talk to you about the show we're both watching.
And now you're getting sucked into the Monwell
Well, and I was
community.
going to kind of say something about that too, is like, do you think there are certain things you could assume about somebody who reads a bunch of Otome Isekai? Because I think some of the reason people are interested in heroin addiction is because we probably don't fit.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are any kind of a standard. If I'm going to be, if I can do that, if I can say we are special without being up on my own behind, I think we are outliers. I think that's why what we think about things is different and weird and interesting.
I feel like of the three of us, Ben has the most of that. And it probably comes from that you were in it before.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But what's interesting is, like, first of all, you reject that.
Yeah.
And then you've also got so much more on top of that is so far removed from it. All of your Bookman stuff. And,
when I started...
You know, how deep you get into language and all that.
When I decided
facets.
I wanted to make content,
when I got infected,
I thought about what I wanted to do. There were a few things I knew a lot about, and like Japanese and anime was one of them. And I very specifically threw that out right off the bat.
Good thinking.
I was like, I don't want to be known for that because of the experience I had with that. Like when I was growing up, if you were a lonely dude, and I was never terrible, I was never like way bad off, because I always had interests outside of it.
Mother's Basement level.
Not
the YouTube
you mean the
channel.
guy or the trope?
The trope.
Yeah. Like I was never that bad, but it was like so easy to fall into that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of traps like that for young guys. They're different these days, but they're still out there.
Can you say Andrew Tate?
Yeah. And I got away from that, and I like got away from it hard. Partly because like I was close to falling into it at a couple of points. And that's why I say I don't want to go back. I'm glad it welcomes different kinds of people now. I'm glad different kinds of titles get brought over. And it's something I've always pushed back on with this podcast, is that there were a lot of people who want to gatekeep it and take it back to what it was, when it was like they only brought over the sci-fi anime. They only brought over the horror and the porn and all the like stuff that was for maladjusted sci-fi loving white dudes. We didn't get a lot of otome isekai. We didn't get any queer manga. We didn't get any. We got a little bit of shoujo. The shoujo tried it and then like very quickly went out of business.
This is maybe a little bit of an aside, but has gatekeeping ever been good for anything besides keeping a city safe?
I was going to say, keeping out literally the barbarians. Open the gates a little.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's good.
I don't think it's actually been good. It can have, you can have... we'll say, I think this, I don't know if we're getting into another episode now, because we've been talking about this for a while. As someone who attempted to control a gate for a community, depends. I think gatekeeping based on... If you're not trying to maintain a literal community of humans who see each other in person, I think gatekeeping is bad. And I also don't think gatekeeping is the word I should be using to describe the situation I'm attempting to
There's something about like trying to preserve a cultural thing, because it's like in 20 years or 50 years, I don't really think there are going to be anime podcasts. I think anime is going to be so integrated into the culture that it's just another format. I don't think you'll be able to tell if it came from Japan, Korea, China, or America.
Comment on this episode if you're listening 20 years in the future.
Yeah. 50, I thought he said 50.
Yeah, maybe it would take longer than 20. I don't know. But like right now, I feel like anime and manga.
What does that mean?
What?
Are Ben and I going to be dead?
I can't speak for you guys. I'm speaking for me.
In 50 years, there's a good chance I'll be dead.
In 50 years, I'm not going to be dead.
I always thought we were talking about 20 years.
Okay, I'm saying
that
50.
was a little
in 20.
Are you unsure about 20 years, Brad?
I'm pretty sure I'll make it 20 more years.
I would hope so. I think I'll make it 20 years.
50s? I could, conceivably.
I'm going to make it for 50. On my shot.
But what I was going to say is, I think right now, anime and manga is basically an artificial distinction. Like, I think these are just comics and cartoons. And the line between...
I think we are getting closer to it.
Yeah, the line between the manga section and the graphic novel section just being the same section is totally arbitrary.
In the Barnes & Noble down in Lancaster, it is. It's literally, they're in the same spot.
But are they intermixed?
Do they mix them?
They're not intermixed, but they're in the exact same area.
We need to be done with this segment soon, but I do want to say I don't want them to be intermixed because my OCD is going to have a freaking conniption when all these tiny, mostly same-size books get messed with the varying sizes of graphic novel comics.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a fit.
Well, but then there will be good and bad things about that too, because
yep, you're right.
Right now we have an anime community where we hang out and we talk and we have fun.
Yeah.
And that might go away. And that, like, how hard do you fight to preserve a culture that's dying?
I mean, I only want to preserve my relationship with you two in that regard, if I'm being entirely honest.
I think it's healthy to let things evolve. Yeah, especially pop culture stuff.
I guess that would mean...
Is this your way of trying to say you're going to leave the podcast? Please don't.
Well, no, I think that what
in
that
50
means...
years, if we're still doing
no.
it.
We're not going to be doing this in 20 years.
No, I think all that means is that instead of the anime podcast, it's all just pop culture.
It just comes back to pop culture talk zone, baby.
ご覧のスポンサーでお送りします。
Are you a fan of Japanese snacks and treats?
Yes.
Then you'll love Sugoi Mart. They offer a wide variety of popular Japanese snacks, candy, drinks, and more, all delivered right to your door. It's not really a snack, but they also sell instant ramen. I haven't had any, but I heard it's pretty good.
I did recently. I got the one from the box that we got, and it was probably the most delicious cup ramen I've ever had.
What flavor was it?
Pokemon flavored.
Pokemon flavored. Well, now you, as a listener of our podcast, can click the link in the description or use code APR15 at checkout for 15% off your first purchase. Just head to SugoiMart.com and shop their selection of delicious Japanese snacks today. So a new chapter of a isekai that I read came out today.
Shocking.
Right. As they do. But this is one that hadn't had a release in, a month or two. And I was like, oh, good. This
Coming
is
back to it.
And so I went and I started reading it and I went, something's off here. Something's not right. Because I'm reading it and I'm like, this is hard to understand. Like, this isn't a good translation. And so I get to the end and I'm like, I'm pretty sure the person who does this translation is one of the people I'm on a Discord for, his group, because he's really good. I really like his stuff, and so I joined his Discord to like help him out and get him more visibility and everything. And so I looked, and the chapter that we released today was not by him. Someone else had decided, hey, this hasn't released in a while. And I want to shout out Black Wolf Translations because he hasn't released stuff in a while because he's got a lot of stuff going on in his life. Mm-hmm. And so, shout out to him. He's a great scanlator. I want to give him props. But this other person came in, and I actually recognized the group that came in and did this.
Saw the gang tag, and I said, not sure about this one.
What struck me was that I feel like this latest chapter was worse quality than they normally have. Mm-hmm. And this also happened just the other day because we were talking about this.
This is a different one?
This is a different one.
What?
Oh my
Again?
God.
People sniping those new chapters.
I feel like when we talked about this before, you guys didn't really understand how much of an issue this is. And so I wanted to talk about that today because the act of one group taking over a series from another group in and of itself is not a big deal. The thing that I have a huge problem with, especially the other one that we were talking about the other day, is where someone comes in and does like a machine translation of it mm-hmm. and just doesn't care at all. And it's barely legible. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the cusp of I'd rather it not be released at all.
Yes, Brad.
That's
we're
where I
almost
always
there.
am.
If someone wants to take over a series and they come in and they do a good job, no issues with that.
Yeah.
There is an issue with sniping, like we were talking about the other day, mm-hmm. where multiple groups or multiple people, individuals sometimes, will put their translation out as quickly as possible so that they can be the ones that get the clicks, right? When another group is the one who normally does it, or, maybe these two groups always go back and forth and they like fight over it, right? And a lot of times when that happens, both of the translations are good, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like one of them is so superior that you're like, oh, obviously I'm
just
always
whatever
going to watch
comes first,
this. Right.
and you just kind of adjust to which one.
But it's when these people come in and they're like, here, I just threw this together in 5 minutes. I'm going to upload this because someone else didn't upload it. And I'm just...
So what I don't understand, and I've never understood about the Scanlation community, the etiquette surrounding it, all the weirdness, I don't know what they get out of it.
Well, that's a good question.
Are they getting paid?
So I think some of the larger groups make some kind of money. They have Patreons and stuff like that.
Yeah, Patreon makes sense, but if you're just some random Yahoo that's like, I put this through machine translation, here you
well,
go.
I think
it's not like,
you gotta
getting, like ad clicks.
You gotta start somewhere, right?
By doing the bare minimum that uses none of your actual brain or abilities.
So
I don't think it would be a good idea to put out something bad to get into it. But I'm also not a random...
Well, there's not... I feel like what you're describing... Like, there's a bad first attempt, and there's literally just... I regurgitated trash onto a page. Like, I did the minimum effort. Not that I tried and did poorly. That I spent as little ability and time and thought on this as possible. I spat out... I barfed out the lowest effort thing I could do.
I think there's two ways that happens. The first one, which I don't particularly mind... although it's still sort of like, why do this, is when someone is like, I want to read this series. No one has translated it yet. So I'm going to go and I'm going to machine translate it. And since I've done that, I might as well put it up for other people.
Okay, when you say it like that, that makes a little bit more sense of like, hey, nobody has this. I wanted it, so I did the one thing that I had within my reasonable tool reach to make, and maybe other people are in my situation.
However, when it's an established person, either a group or an individual that comes out and they're like, nobody put this out for a while, here's a new chapter, and it's literally just like a crap machine translation, that I don't understand at all.
So this is what I don't understand. Is this all considered sniping? Is this all the same thing?
No, sniping would be the one that I described where like they try to get it out.
You try
first.
to get in first.
Yeah, somebody there's
the
already a
clicks.
group or a particular person putting chapters out, translating chapters consistently, and some rando just shows up and just
Is there any
shits out one.
incentive for that? Like, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you're not going to get a chunk of the click revenue from the ads on the platform.
No, and I mean a platform like MangaDex, where you might be able to find these if that was something you wanted to do. I don't know about all that. They don't make any money, so they're completely run off of donations.
Do they not have ads?
No,
I mean, probably the MangaDex is probably the one getting the money or whatever.
they
not the
did
people writing it.
they did at one point run some ads to cover like server costs and stuff.
Yeah.
but that it was
That's
never
not going to the
permanent.
writers.
Well, right. It was never permanent or anything. And that's the key, is that they don't want to make money off of it because,
You don't want to pay taxes on your illegal business.
well,
Yeah.
to an extent, yeah.
I don't think the
A
word is
gray area.
prestige. That feels too nice.
Support
and
the
big
official
of a
release.
word. But I think there's a certain amount of, I guess maybe in a lot of these cases, perceived, like, we're bringing you a service and we want some of that. Like, I would love to know what happened to the two, I think they were Chinese students. They were Chinese or Korean that did the original Duwang English translation of JoJo Part 4 before there was any JoJo Part 4
That's the
translation
Ocean
in
dub,
English.
right?
What?
The Ocean dub? Or
What?
isn't that what it's
the
called?
Ocean dub is a Dragon Ball Z
Oh,
thing.
okay.
I'm talking about there was, before JoJo got huge in America, there was no official or like good fan translation. It was like students, I don't remember if they were Korean or Chinese, but they were somebody who both Japanese and English was not their native language, for like a school project translated JoJo Part 4. And it's a mess.
I
But
guess
there
that
wasn't anything
so
else.
Why did anybody?
And I don't know if they're known. I don't know what their life is now that they because now like it's. I mean, I think it helps is that JoJo is both really popular and really weird. So like that translation, especially now that they were good ones, is like celebrated as this like weirdness.
But why did anybody do bootleg translations back then?
Because people wanted to read these things.
Okay,
Is it just
but
like
why
they
did
are
those
now.
people take the time to do that? And
Because
then
it
put
was a
out?
school. They wanted this, and it was a
Not
school
necessarily
project.
them, obviously.
Okay,
school
this
project
is admittedly a specific situation where the story is that it was a school project, so you kind of give them more benefit of the doubt that they were students trying to make something that from when there was nothing. But I could see more basic, twisted versions of that where it's just, I'm just some random on the internet and I want my name out there, and this is me doing the bare minimum.
Yeah,
I
and
was
that's
going to say,
exactly
back in the day, there was a website called Toriyama's World that I used to go to. And I think some of their translations live on to this day. Their thing was when a series would get picked up, they'd stop doing it. And this was back when most of the series in Shonen Jump were very unlikely to ever...
By the way, all of the big Scanlation groups do that.
Yeah. So that was their thing, was like, this was a hobby. And there were a lot of people who shared the interest. So you get one guy who would buy it, one guy who would translate it, one guy who would letter set, And from that, they'd get people who would come and support, talk about it, build a community around it. But it was for fun. I don't understand why you would do it if you don't care about doing it well.
And that's my thing.
I think
because
that's where we're coming from.
A lot of people do it for exactly those reasons. They want the community. They do it for fun. They want the translation. So that's why they do it.
But sniping doesn't seem like it would achieve any of those goals.
No, and you're
Sniping
exactly
poorly.
right. And that's what doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
Or the people who describe where it's like both languages involved, they're not really good at either of them. So it's
Right.
just like, why are you what is, clearly it's not good to read for you because English isn't your language. So why are you here?
the one that we were talking about the other day that wasn't this one that happened today. That one was significantly worse. The one today was legible. It was just not very good. The one from the other day was almost incomprehensible. The typesetting was adequate.
Well, yeah, that's
but the actual translation was almost incomprehensible. And on the comments for that particular chapter, everybody was ripping them up. And I went, and the next day, I think it was the very next day, I see another alert for that series, and I click on it, and the previous very bad translation was gone. They got ripped so hard that they took it down.
Yeah, I feel like that's public opinion.
Well, because
proper work.
The thing I've always noticed with these is if you're somebody who really just wants to read the next one, okay. I kind of don't even... I guess if you got into it and then it just stopped suddenly, I can understand why you want to keep going. But I don't know people who don't have any... I don't really understand if you don't have any interest in learning the language, why you would keep seeking out books written in that language when there's a million written in English.
Do we want to get into culture fetishization?
Well, yeah, there's a bit of that. I guess that's my thing. Like, I don't get that. Like I said, if it's a series that you started and then all of a sudden it stopped, you're invested in this particular story, but not so much so that you want to learn an entire language just to know what happened. I get that.
I mean, that would take a long time.
But yeah, the thing that's always frustrated me with some of these translations is like, as somebody who's, trying and very, very slowly making progress on learning some Japanese, it's not hard to learn enough to be able to look things up. If you want to take the time to look them up.
I feel like it's not that hard to do a machine translation and then edit it so that it makes sense.
It's at least
massage
readable.
it into place.
Yeah.
I guess you could say, like, I don't want to take any responsibility. I mean, if you cared about presenting the work correctly, you could say, I don't want to rewrite it because then I'm just writing fanfic.
Well, but then you wouldn't put out that machine translation because that's almost incomprehensible most of the time.
Yeah, if you're going to use it for why put it out at all? What do you think? Yeah. I feel like that's what we keep coming back around to.
There is actually one more kind of person who does this.
Okay.
That it's a bit more niche than these other ones.
Okay.
And it sort of makes sense to me. And that's when, but it's also still a little bit weird because all of these big groups have their Discords, they have email. A lot of them have their own website where they put chapters up for a day or two before they put them out on the aggregators or whatever. So some people will take a series that hasn't had a translation in a while, and they will translate a chapter, most of the time poorly, and put it up there. And like on the credits page or whatever, they'll put, hey, whatever group that was doing this before, like you should put out your No, it's not even holding it hostage. They're basically bumping it. They're like, hey,
see how many views you could have gotten.
Well, please come back. Yeah. This is my one way of turning on the bat signal because I know you were here.
What really baffles me about these people, because I understand where they're coming from, but as I said, these big groups have so many places where you can talk to them. So why wouldn't you just go there and be like, hey, what's the status of this series?
Brad, I don't think a lot of these people are the most like socially conscious or like capable or, that I would trust in these situations.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's got to be a quirk of my brain because this has always been... I've gone down the rabbit hole of a couple languages and it's always been something like... I wanted to read something I didn't have access to, so I learned enough to kind of look it up, dictionary my way through it one word at a time. And I understand that's harder to do.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Well, it's especially hard to do with languages that are not written in the Roman alphabet. But it's not that hard, especially anymore, where you can... there's like 70,000 kanji characters in Unicode now. You can cut and paste them. You can copy them into searches. Like, you can look it up if you want to take the time to look it up. And I don't understand how you can want to read something so badly that you're going to go through all this meta work of typesetting it and posting it on a thing and like making an account on these things to post and not just take the time to look up a couple of words.
I wonder if a lot of these people don't see the other people who do the machine translations and get eviscerated, and then the chapter gets pulled. So they have no context to go, oh, if I do this, people are going to rip me a new one. Like, and they think, oh, I'm doing such a big service for everybody by putting this out.
I mean, maybe if they're just little kids.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, this gives me big, like, teenagers with nothing.
They just don't know where to start.
Who don't know anything, so they're just kind of like, I guess I'll whatever. This is what I do. Like, they just don't. They're just not socially community conscious because they're freaking little kids. They don't know any better.
I also think, as far as adults go, I don't know if you've ever seen maybe like a tweet or something on Facebook or Reddit or whatever where a person obviously doesn't know how to put their thoughts into words properly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they can speak properly, but when they type something out, it's incoherent. And I wonder if some of these people are those people who have an inability to proofread something. And so when they get the machine translation, however it goes into their brain, they're like, yep, that makes sense. Even though the rest of us who like use words normally are like, what the hell does this say?
What planet are you from?
I don't know. I don't know. It bothers me, I guess, because people take the time to write it, and I don't know. Maybe it's just I don't have the appetite for content that some of these people do. Like,
it's very interesting for you to say that, considering how much you read.
Well, yeah, but
There's always things to read in the language.
I'm willing to take 2 months to read a Japanese children's book. Like,
That's pretty weird.
But I mean, because I wanted to learn the language, that's part of it. But like, if I'm going to bother reading it, like if I was going to actually sit down and take on the task of trying to read it in not English, I would just sit down and do it.
You're also someone who like values like real things, intellectual things. Like,
Well, I was gonna say, if I didn't value it enough to do that, I'm just gonna give up on it.
but I can see someone going, oh, I'm going to machine translate this children's book. And here I'm going to put it out for.
Well, I
other
obviously
people.
wouldn't have read the children's book if I was going to machine translate it. Like, I didn't desperately want to know what the children's book said.
Hypothetically
yeah.
speaking.
I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
I didn't need to know what Spot was up to.
Mr. Skeleton.
Mr. Skeleton was the children's book I
Mr.
translated.
Skeleton.
Yeah.
Hey, let us know in the comments if you'd like us to.
You want to see my translation of Mr.
Really
Skeleton?
want to hear Ben in a segment talk about his translation of Mr. Skeleton.
Gai Kotsu-san.
Spooky, scary skeleton.
Spooky, scary Kotsu-san.
So yeah, I mean, moral of the story: stop putting out machine translated
Well, the story,
chapters.
Brad's getting real tired of reading manga on the internet. He's really sick of them.
The thing that bothers me the most is when it's a series that I'm invested in, and then I get like a page or two in before I realize just how bad the whole thing is, and then I'm like,
You know what? It works though, because if you showed me that, I'd do it for them, because I would just be so angry.
You get the thing of like, well, this was so garbage, I could do better, and that motivates you because I've been there. That's gotten me to do things in the past.
that makes me wonder though.
I
like,
could limp along.
if I went and actually like if I went and got on the Discord for one of those groups and was like, hey, what happened to this series? You haven't put it out in 3 months. Would they go, oh, hey, we forgot about that. We actually, it's mostly done. We'll get that out. And
Yeah, we're just-
like, what would happen then? Did anybody try that? Nobody left a comment to that effect. So I don't know.
I got to imagine these are pretty obscure series.
Everything I read is obscure. What are you
This
talking
man
about?
has figured out how to get underneath the bottom of the barrel. Ben.
Yeah.
The underground mole people.
somebody
zone.
put
it's a very
a barrel-
specific group of people.
Somebody put a barrel on top of the well. I am digging at the bottom of the well.
Yeah, because some of these feel like I think if it was just something even a few dozen people were
This
interested
isn't freaking
in.
like the new One Piece chapter is
Yeah.
out. I need to know things like I need it pumped into me as soon as possible.
Listen.
Oh,
It's unacceptable, okay? One Punch Man, right?
yeah.
One Punch Man,
Yes.
okay? On the One Punch Man subreddit. If you really like One Punch Man, someone will post the raws, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
They lock the subreddit when the raws get posted. Within 3 hours, it's translated and uploaded. Well,
Yeah.
they do a good.
Yeah.
So whoever's doing
Yeah.
it does a good job. Because I also then read the chapter when it comes out on Viz later,
Yeah.
and they're almost always very close, almost identical.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If there's a big series, like a lot of people speak both Japanese and English, and most of them read manga.
My point is, it's possible to do it well.
Yeah, you just got to be
Yeah.
popular. You just got to not be mole people.
Again,
Again,
I'd
Brad.
rather them just
Okay.
keep it to themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, we're talking in a circle, guys.
I feel like this now we're getting common ground because we didn't used to feel this way. You've put up with translations I would never put up with.
That's true. That is true. My bar is obviously lower, but I do still have one. It's not at the bottom of the Mariana
He'll
Trench.
go over it.
I don't
He'll complain, but
I
he'll
don't-
go over that bar.
I don't need James Cameron yet.
Yet.
It's coming.
So Kermit, did we get anything in the mailbag today?
We did. We got another letter from Truxan.
Good. I was worried because he was having some trouble last time.
Yeah, he had a rough time last time.
Yeah.
Some isekai punk stole his wife and like messed up his hometown, and now he swore revenge.
I wonder, since he's in that other world now, obviously he was in the business for a long time, but I wonder if anything that we've talked about on this podcast, because he listens to all our episodes, if we've been helpful to him in any way with him being out there.
Let's read the letter and find out. I gotta get my activation phrase again now that we've talked a little bit. I'm walking here, gabagool. Do you hear that time I got reincarnated in the same world as an anime podcaster host, Brad, Ben, and Kermit? My friends, thank good kami above. I did it! I sent that sniveling wimp who had the balls to call himself a hero back to Earth, and I did it my way, just like that bastard Sinatra used to say. I'm gonna tell you all about it. So I know I learned enough magic to send you guys a letter, but I stopped after that. I'm fighting back against these worlds. You think I'm gonna learn their dumb magic systems? So I'm putting in this time, training my body, scheming up how to get this boy gallivanting around the countryside, causing problems like it's its own personal toy box. One thing I did learn is how to be a blacksmith, just like my great Oji-san back in the old country did. I forged the remains of my truck bumper. R.I.P. by the way. And now there's written instructions to cross yourself.
Okay.
Oh, like the sign of the cross?
Yes, he's like very specific. I just assumed you would I just wanted to point that out there. He was very clear in his letter about that.
I guess he's Catholic.
Yeah, Kami-sama takes all forms.
I'm gonna restart that sentence. I forged the remains of my truck bumper into a mean pair of brass knuckles that would make even a mafioso bouncer blush. I'm gonna knock that numpty back in the last week. Literally. But to do that, I need to get close to him. I saw how that Spadunk took my wife and his little gang of girls, so I got this bright idea. Just like Bugs Bunny used to do in Looney Tunes, a real man's cartoon. Truxan here is gonna dress up as a beautiful woman and sneak his way into the inner circle of this little jerk. And let me tell you guys, I made a beautiful broad. Absolutely stunning. My makeup, my dress, the little vavoom, you should have seen me strut my stuff. I learned all about those harem things from your heroin addiction podcast. And while I don't touch the stuff myself after what happened to my cousin Vinny, it was very elucidating and infiltrating that space. I think he thinks you're actually talking about the drug heroin.
Yeah.
I think there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding on Truxan then on that one.
Well, he's in a very different sort of harem than we were talking about.
It is addicting.
It is a different heroin. Shoot, where did I leave off? Yeah, cousin video elucidated. And would you believe it? It worked! Got him, hook, line, and sinker. He couldn't keep his eyes off me. And just as he goes in to grope the melons, I got stashed under my dress, the little pervert. I pull out the knucks and give him a left hook. He went sailing through the air, and just as he was about to land, he blinked out of existence and went back to the street. He died on the first time like nothing had happened. I had done it. He'd felt the power of my Risakai fist, and now this world was free of his rule. Of course, there's a lot to clean up still, but I got my wife back, and we're headed back to the village to rebuild. I'm not sure what's next for old Truxan, but I think he's earned some R&R. Yours truly, Truxan.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Good for him.
I'm really happy for Truxan that he figured out a plan in a very Truxan manner.
I guess
But
we now know
He did it his way.
where the power of isekai is stored.
In his fist?
In the bumper.
Oh,
In the bumper.
I was going to say he
I
mastered...
mean, it's in his fist now.
He mastered the Risakai no Ken. I thought it was Densetsu.
The otherworldly fist? Oh my gosh, Truxan, please, in the future, if you're going to do this more, please call it the otherworldly fist. Because that's really cool. So yeah,
Well,
like
good
he's
for him.
learning,
Yeah.
he's getting back. I genuinely don't know what's next for Truxan. But
I'm not sure what he learned from heroin addiction, but I'm glad we helped.
You know what? I feel like he got the gist.
He got enough. I know he misunderstood and he thought it was the drug, but
I guess
he
the
learned
last
enough
one,
of the tropes to get in there.
the last one we talked about was very violent.
I guess the real question here, though, is did the Risakai protagonist die?
That's a good question, because if he was isekai'd the first time by being hit by the truck, that would imply that he was transported. It wasn't a soul. Like, what happens is if you die and then you're isekai'd, your soul gets transferred, you get a new body and everything. But if you are hit isekai'd or portal isekai'd, you take your body with you. So
Okay.
you're not dead.
So I'm going to have to invoke a JoJo neither of you have seen. So imagine it like in JoJo Part 5, the main enemy, Diavolvo, basically has like his stand power allows him to edit life and time as if it was film. So basically what happened is that the truck is coming at the kid and essentially like time has been erased where the truck hit them. So they're just back as if the truck never happened or it like had passed through them. Mm-hmm. And they didn't, it's like edited together back that, oh, that timeline for them ended, but now they've been edited back into it after the truck has passed.
Although, you know-
still alive at that moment in time, whenever that was.
Can I imagine that then another car hit them?
I was going to say, that would be amazing, is you get isekai'd and you're like, I'm alive.
You die, but you only get one isekaiing, so he's just dead.
Well, it wouldn't be a truck-san the second time.
No,
it would
so
just
he
be a
wouldn't have gotten
regular
transported.
car. You just
So-
get nailed.
It would just be a sedan son.
So, Truxan, can you please report back about that next time? What would happen if he got hit by a car then?
I wonder if he can actually tell what happened to them, because he's in the other world. He doesn't have access to any of the information.
What if Truxan knows?
Yeah.
I think Truxan knows.
He can read the blood on his knuckles. He can read their fate like tea leaves.
Like a good marinara.
He
Like a
knows.
good marinara.
Here, look. Truxan knows his truck.
That's true.
These knuckles are forged of this truck, just like his Oji-san back in the day.
These knuckles are made for punching.
Yes.
And that's just what they'll do.
He sent him, hey, that Truxan sent him to this world the first time, and he sent him back. I brought you into this world, and I can bring you out of it.
Literally.
That would have been a really good one-liner to have used there.
Hey, maybe he can adopt that as his catchphrase the next time he goes to punch an asshole.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and others, do you know what time it is?
Ladies and gentlemen.
8:37.
That's not what I meant.
Don't give away our secrets.
They don't know when we recorded.
We didn't say if it was AM or PM.
They don't know that we're in the mountain time zone.
I thought we were in Japan.
What?
Is that the canon?
When did that happen?
Okay, we're in Japan, where it's tomorrow.
Did you go on a filler adventure last time?
Secretly, this is
Eat your hamburgers, Apollo.
Anyway, Kermit, what time is it?
It's not Manga Book Club. It's just a book. It's book club.
What? This isn't words about books.
It's true, but it's close enough to what we talk about that this felt like reading a manga, so we were talking about it. So, many times before, I believe we have talked about a series called Legends of Localization, which is a series, I'm going to butcher his name, by translator Clyde. I think it's Mandolin. At least that's how I pronounce it.
It's Mandolin.
It's Mandolin? Cool.
Like the cooking instrument or the instrument?
I don't know how either of them is spelled.
I think it's
but I know
spelled
what
like
you're
the
talking
instrument.
about.
I'm pretty sure they're spelled the same way.
Mandelin. So he's done 3 of these so far, and what they are about video games being translated from, or Japanese video games being translated into English. The first one is about the original Legend of Zelda on the Famicom or the NES. The second one is about Earthbound, which I adore, and that one's a lot bigger because there's a lot more going on in Earthbound to discuss. And the new one that just came out, which I was literally dying to talk about on the podcast, is actually switches it up a little bit. This is about Undertale, which was a game originally written in English, and about its translation into Japanese.
Ooh.
Which Clyde was a somewhat, I don't know the right word to say. He was not on the project, but every so often they would reach out to him to help
Consulting.
out. A consultant, that's the right word for it. So we're going to be specifically talking about this one, the Undertale one. I also love Undertale. It's not really come up on the podcast because it hasn't had the reason to. But it's like literally one of my favorite things ever. Like reading this made me like go into my like 3rd or 4th Undertale Deltarune Renaissance, where I'm just like, I need to take in all the information that happened since the last time I looked at this. But if you don't know, Undertale is an I guess I would call it an RPG where you don't necessarily need to kill the monsters. You can befriend them all, and a lot of it's very. Parts of it are very inspired by like Earthbound and old, again, Japanese RPGs back on like the Super Nintendo and whatnot.
What's Toby?
Toby Fox is the creator, the very the enigmatic Toby Fox. And there's like a lot of dialogues and like jokes and references and puns and like literally every corner, but a lot of the times a lot of words. There's a lot of like lore baked into Undertale. A lot of the time, so things can be very, like, things sometimes have to be very specific to either communicate something or maybe cannot communicate other information.
I bet everybody's heard Megalovania.
I think everybody's heard Localization if they don't know Undertale.
Yeah.
So, I mean, side note to all this, go play Undertale. Like, it's probably $10 on Steam. It's worth your time. I still think it's one of the greatest video games ever made, but I'm going to stop gushing too much. So what makes this really interesting is that in the case of other games and a lot of games when it comes to Japanese to English translations, and probably the other way around, you don't have the creator giving you information about what something is supposed to mean. You know, Nintendo of America had some contacts with Japan when they were translating Earthbound, but they don't literally have an entire like Excel sheet on everything, having notes from the creator and constant back and forth communication.
That's a really good point, because those older, even anime, like a lot of that stuff came over and it was well out of the hands of the original creators at that point.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating, to see this move in the other direction. And to see things of, like, we talk a lot about how it's, like, certain things of, like, Japan has a billion words for certain things that are, like, different levels of politeness while saying it, or things like that, where, like, we don't have that. Like, there's certain things, or, like, all of the different, like, pronouns people use get lost coming into English. But it's either things where, coming from English, where it's, like, especially because, like, Undertale is a text-based game, where it's, like, the way that we write words. I never thought about, like, Japanese doesn't have capitalization in its lettering system. Like, that's a thing that we have. So it's like certain characters that talk in really specific, like, they talk in all caps, or like every word of it, like the starting letter of every word is capitalized in the way, because Undertale does a lot of that, of like the way that the text is written helps show the voice of the character.
Oh yeah.
So when you see that text style coming somewhere else, you know, when you're seeing this really particular, I think it's in all caps or something like capitalization, Papyrus is talking, but you can't do that in Japanese. So they like reformatted the engine so he speaks in like right to left, like written from top to bottom, like Japanese poetry speak, to capture his quote unquote voice, because they couldn't just change it over to like, you just capitalize Japanese, like that's not a thing. And that's,
I've seen in manga sometimes they'll use like different fonts to denote like this one person is talking, or they're talking in a particular way or something like that.
And to fonts, like, again, Undertale, fonts are really important. Papyrus speaks in Papyrus script. That's what his name is after. Freaking Sans, Comic Sans. Like, a lot of characters, fonts are important. Fonts that don't exist in Japanese because they're not right in English. And it's just, I was already really excited for this, but it was really refreshing to see the problems that we always see of translating from Japanese to English go the opposite direction, and all the weirdnesses that can come with that, where it's like, now you guys have to capture a pun that was native to English in Japanese. And how do you do that? And the idea of like, not every moment is going to be able to retain every single joke or reference or bit of wordplay, but as long as you keep true to the spirit of it, maybe certain spots will have more jokes that weren't there, and like a character name or like a little interaction where it's like, it'll reference something that just fits this character better than it did in English. And it felt like this was especially after reading the Earthbound one, this exchange where it's just, you really get this feeling of like, not every line is going to perfectly capture the spirit in each one as it changes languages. Your hope is that collectively throughout the entire thing, that it captures the tone and the idea, so that somebody playing in English and somebody playing with Japanese, even if their literal experience is a little different, because there's like, they have some references to that in here, some specific cases, they've generally gotten the same feeling playing it. Something in that stood out for me a lot, and that goes into that whole, like, sometimes Japanese in certain vectors is going to have to capture more information that English doesn't, because we don't have that, is personal pronouns. And Ben, I'm going to need you for this one a little bit. I'm going to get to the page so I can say it right. But there was a big, before this official translation came out for Undertale, there was fans translations, because there will always be fan translations. And originally, the character Sans, who's like a goofy guy who turns Seer at the end, always used the personal pronoun ore. Mm-hmm. Ben, can you tell me about ore while I look for the other one and you can give people context?
So, ore is a masculine first-person pronoun. It's used by men. It's a little more intimidating. You wouldn't say ore to, like, your boss. You would use it mostly in peer conversations. And it's usually men switch from like boku to ore in late teens, early adulthood.
Oh, do you mean ore?
Ore.
Yeah. So there's a ton of first person pronouns. In
I learned that. I went Googling because I didn't know all these. Like, the book actually covers a lot of these and goes, here's a bunch of characters that you would know that use this particular pronoun. And it's also interesting to read about pronoun choice where it's not gender based, which was like an interesting just cultural thing to me, where it's like, this isn't about like boy or girl or whatever perceived gender. It was like there was other things with it. So the big change, I'll actually just read directly from the book. After consulting with Toby, the translator settled on oira. I don't actually know how to pronounce that. It's O-I-R-A? Oira. For Sans pronoun. In everyday Japanese, oira gives off a rural, unsophisticated bumpkin vibe, but in entertainment, it's also used by aloof, happy-go-lucky characters. And this clashed with the original fan translation that was ore, and it's like, Sans isn't as bumpkin, but like, reading that, knowing his character now, I think it makes a lot of sense. Because he's got a very, like, he talks like he's always giggling, like he's laughing, and he's got a like charming bumpkin-y vibe to him. And then when you do the path where he gets really serious, he starts using ore, which is a thing that we can't capture in English that becomes stronger in Japanese, which I thought was really fascinating.
It becomes more intimidating. It becomes more serious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are those two words related?
That I don't know.
I mean, it might just be like it was Ore, and just because it was the freaking... What is it always? Is it Kansai that they always
Kansai
do?
is the dialect
they didn't say Kansai in here, but it's like that's the general idea with that.
Because generally when we talk about like the different dialects in America, especially like a deep south dialect or something, they're still going to spell things the same way. They just say them very
I mean, maybe
differently.
if that goes hard enough, it becomes its own word, even if
Maybe.
it's mostly the same. I don't know.
Like a y'all.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
I think this is like what I've read. There's a little bit of politics with dialect. Like, the Tokyo dialect is the dialect, but like we didn't vote on that. That's just where the capital was, and that's where the decision got made. So there's like horror stories of kids getting beaten in Okinawa because they didn't speak with the Tokyo dialect. Like we don't. And I don't think they do anymore, punish people for saying y'all, but...
Not physically, anyway.
Well, yeah. This was... They wanted... You talk like me. I talk right. But we didn't vote on that.
They don't have anybody who's left-handed either, right?
No. Not unless they want to be wrong.
So there's two other major things I want to get into. Like, there's like so many things in the book. Like, again, I would 100%. It's a very nicely made book as well. All the Legends of Localization book. Really, just general shout out to Fangamer in general. All their stuff that I've ever bought from them has always been of incredible quality and make, and have always been purchases that I'm like really excited to have.
If you're interested in language stuff, or if you're interested in any of those particular games,
So...
should
Fangamer
definitely...
has a lot of stuff. Fangamer is not literally just a Legend of Localization book, though they're the main sellers
but
of them.
specifically for Legends of Localization.
But they have a lot of good merch in general, and everything I bought from them is really good.
Legend of Zelda, Earthbound, and
Undertale.
So
And there is also another one that is a small one that I've also placed here to read, to talk more about at the end, that's called This Be Book Bad Translations, Video Games, a guided toward the funniest and strangest translation mistakes throughout video game history, which we'll end with.
I will borrow that.
You can borrow it. That's why I pulled it out.
I just wanted to add real quick before you go into your final two things is I was doing those blog posts on books you might want to read to learn about Japan, like as a culture.
Yeah.
And the third post I actually held off on because you said you wanted to talk about this. I was going to do the Legends of Localizations that you lent me.
Yeah.
And I have not played Zelda or Earthbound. I played
You'll notice the
very
first thing
little.
I said was,
Yeah.
if you're interested in languages.
but even if you only are kind of familiar with them, I think if you care about this stuff,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Well, and as
I-
someone who doesn't read books, stuff is interesting to
I
me.
devoured this
So,
book. Like,
when-
I literally slowed down at the end because I was sad I was going to be out of it.
Well, and these I don't know about the one you're talking about right now. I haven't seen it, but the other one's like a lot of pictures, a lot of icons.
Oh yeah, very,
I mean,
very like readable, very clear. If like you don't have to know Earthbound and remembered all the things. They very specifically in this Undertale one to go like, hey, if you don't know about translation or Undertale, they'll like, I don't know how good it will be for you, but he makes a point to try to lay out everything he's talking about. There's a glorious opening segment about what localization is, not just translation, but localization. And it went over a bunch of things that we talk about a lot about, especially you, Ben. I mean, I think I would love to reread those first two because I think I read those before we were really we got deep into this and had the podcast.
yeah,
It's just, by the way, listeners, they're trying to get me to read it by talking about the pictures because I can't read anything without pictures.
well,
in it.
he talks. I mean, he talks about what I would say is you can read as much or as little of these as you want,
Yeah.
because they're laid out in a way that
It's very like bite-sized, like
Yeah.
here's a particular scenario, here's some lines, or here's a character, or here's a thing. Like it's a lot of little like anecdotal things, but it's like, I mean, at least the Undertale book after the opening where it's like, here's what Undertale is, here's what the concept of localization and all the different ways that a straight translation doesn't work or just different things. It was really good. I'd love to, I could do an entire episode just literally reading through those, but you should, buy the book and do that. But it mostly just walks through the game chronologically about like, we're still like each chapter is the different parts of Undertale. I know Earthbound is sort of that, and there's like some appendixes for like, here's all the enemies, here's all the items and stuff. But one of the things I wanted to talk about with this that I found fascinating that I actually foreshadowed in part 1 of this episode is, like, Ben, how you described, what was it, Gundam Wing was big in America, but it wasn't in Japan.
yeah.
It's the idea that because of what Undertale is pulling from, which is a lot of JRPGs that were translated maybe not the best into English, there are lines in here in Undertale that reference those moments. And there are moments that stand out to American gamers because the translation was weird, so the line stood out. Not a little reference for the Undertale one, but the one that always comes to mind is from an old Final Fantasy of You Spoony Bard. I don't know that I'm getting blank stares. That one I knew I've never played the Final Fantasies, but I always knew that one, and it was such a weird, like, it's a lot of these are like the translation is weird, and that's why it stood out to American.
All your base or belong to us is
that one's a little bit more out of the bounds.
I am error.
It's ones where like the word choice was like not completely off the thing, but it was just like that seems weird that you would say it like that. Where if Toby didn't have his notes, the translator would never notice that this mostly mundane sounding thing was a reference to something. And in most cases, they're like, oh, we'll just go find out what the Japanese line for it is. But in a lot of those cases, the Japanese line, even if you do the same thing as what the game was in Japanese, is mundane, and people wouldn't get it. Mm-hmm. So is it proper to localize it as this is referencing a thing that went from Japanese to English, and because of that it was strange, because it was in an era before, I mean, those translators didn't have, notes for most of what they were doing. They literally had a bunch of lines separated from each other. There was no context.
Hey, go back and listen to our episode on localization.
Yeah.
Because I think that localization versus straight translation, and I think this is the conclusion we came to in that episode, is that it's a case-by-case kind of thing. You need to decide, and sometimes within a series, from one page to another or whatever, you need to decide, like, is this something that needs localized or just straight translated? I feel like in something like Undertale, because those references are important and integral to it, you sort of need to localize it.
Well, and we were talking, we don't talk a lot about video games on the podcast, but like when you're localizing manga, you have the option of throwing in an asterisk and a translation note. You can't really do that in a video game.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what makes it interesting here, especially because it's like, they're not translating it in the order that the story is happening. They're just going, here's the big Excel doc, translate these lines. And sometimes you miss it, or like I said, the one that was big here, it's like without Toby's notes, there's a lot of these little moments that don't sound like anything unless you know that bit for the people that know it. And then that was another thing of just talking about the translator. It's like, to be a good localizer translator, you just need to know about things to know when they are a reference, when it is a cultural reference or something specific. So I found it really fascinating where some of these cases, it's like, I mean, there's a lot of that in the book. It's like, what do you do? Do you just use, not let you literally translate it, do you just use the Japanese version of the line as it shows up in that game at that moment? Or you do something else? What's the more important thing here? Because it's not like, I don't know if like Japan has a bunch of English games came over and were translated strangely and have like endearing lines that people remember.
Well, so give me like a slight spoiler. What do they choose to do? Do they write something wholly original, or
in a lot of the cases they just do whatever the Japanese was originally in the game and roll with it, and they make a point to say, the reference won't stand out as much, but like there's a couple spots where it's like, this is what Toby wants.
Okay.
It also helps that Toby Fox is somebody who is still learning Japanese. I mean, he's now been to Japan multiple times. He's freaking incredible. He's freaking making music for Pokemon, and a bunch of Japanese artists want to work with him constantly. I didn't know it's wild.
Huh.
Dude, it's wild. And like I've now seen him from old footage before Undertale came out and he became a thing, but it's like he will not show up on camera, he will not speak. Like they had a big anniversary for Undertale when they put out Deltarune episode 2 with the fan gamer people where they're playing through it, and I don't know where he actually is, but I don't know if it's him or somebody else, is like puppeting the little like annoying dog that is his stand-in, and he is writing text-to-speech so that is speaking to all of them and on the stream in the moment.
Oh, so like Hawks.
Well, he's not physically there. Like, that's the thing. It's just like he's this just kind of strange enigma, and that adds to the joy and the mystery of Undertale. So my final thing, which is maybe just really interesting to me because of my Renaissance deep dive, is we're gonna have to get in the weeds on this one a little bit. But this is a thing that I find interesting between English alphabet being letters and sounds and Japanese alphabet being phonemes, which is like word sound parts. Does that make sense? I don't know how to describe phonemes, really, to people who don't know what phonemes are. Like, G is the sound a letter makes. Ga is a phoneme.
We don't... So there's...
Our letters are not phonemes, usually.
There's only one consonant in Japanese. Everything else is a consonant plus sound. Sometimes they're fully voiced, sometimes they're half
like
voiced.
wa, not just wo, but wa.
There's no G, there's Ga.
Exactly. That's actually very fitting to the exact example I'm going to talk about.
What's the one consonant?
So I'm trying to figure out how to describe this as cleanly and quickly as possible. So there's like a super secret character that has so much freaking fan lore about, and like you have to dig into code files, and it rarely show up in Undertale, of a character called Gaster, Dr. Gaster. There's like a bunch of little side things. Millions and millions of YouTube videos have been made speculating about what the deal is with this guy. Like he's like hidden in the code files, and there's like weird stuff that references him. That's like, it will only show up, like there's a thing called fun rating, which you get randomly determined when you start the game, and if they're really specific values out of 100, things will show up that relate to him, but also sometimes not. So in English, there's a spot where you can just go to a little spot, and very rarely in a playthrough, you'll get a call. Let me get the exact... I want to see if I can find the exact verbiage of it. But you will basically get a call of like, hello, I'd like to talk to G. You get a G, and then it cuts off. And then it's like, oh, we got the wrong number. And then what they call the wrong number song plays. And like the text is like, oh, we got the number was wrong. And it's this funny little moment. And everybody thinks that's somebody trying to call Gaster. Because it's like, oh, I want to speak to G. And it stops. So in Japanese, when they started the translation, they don't have letters. And the translator assumes, this is Gaster. I'll use Ga. I'll use the character for Ga. And Toby comes in and goes, no, don't do that. And because... in this moment, it's supposed to be a kind of a weird, ominous, mysterious message. To fix this problem, they leave it in English. Because it's supposed to be this weird, mysterious thing, and they can't... If they had to do it in Japanese, it would give away more information
of the word,
than he wants. And that was that thing where it's like sometimes, not even just in word meaning, because there's like a bunch of spots where it's like determination is an important word in Undertale, and they had to pick the right Japanese word to capture what Toby means, because it comes up a lot in a really particular way. And that was something here where it's like, to translate it into Japanese, more information will come out about something that's supposed to be mysterious and unclear. And to get around that, they just said, well, then you're not translating. It's in English. It's supposed to be weird, and you don't need this, but it's supposed to be strange and spooky. And that continues to sit with me, that it's just like, and the whole pronouns thing and other things like that, where it's like, you can gain more information. More information needs to be created that didn't exist before for this translation. To fill in the language levers and pulleys and systems that were in place in Japanese that aren't in English. And, we've seen in vice versa cases where it's like, Japanese to English, we lose some of the things they have, so you kind of need to sometimes use the things that English has that Japanese doesn't to capture feelings and ideas for things that just a direct translation wouldn't. Or new information that wouldn't have been present in Japanese by the way we speak and process language and stuff like that. So,
do they run into problems with like the original uses more pronouns and like the translation would just use names, but they're supposed to, like, English can have a lot of ambiguous pronouns.
Yeah.
But Japanese pronouns are kind of overly familiar.
There's a couple where it's like a character wasn't gendered, that either like they make a like they have to make a specific point to not gender, even if it's not important that they're not gendered, but they're still gonna have to, like, there's a couple of those where it's like they have to use a pronoun. They're just a little side character. I think in particular I'm thinking of a character called Monster Kid, which like they very specifically never gender in English, but they have to use a pronoun because they're referring to themselves or something. And it's like a lot of this is not just like, is them asking, like, hey, they ran into this problem and this is how they tried to navigate it. It's not just like we knew exactly what we're doing and we did this. It's like, and it's that approach, and like it's a series, especially reading this one, because you have the notes from Toby back and forth. It feels like a series of battles of like, this one we really knocked out of the park, but this was the best that we could do with it. Or it's like, this one references it's an English idiom, so when we translate it, we tried to find a similar Japanese idiom. Or sometimes it's like, there's nothing that matches over here, we're just going to do our best with it. Or it's like, sometimes you just have to accept we can't capture a joke here, It just doesn't translate. We'll try to do more somewhere else. And I really want to go back and read those first two again. But this one was it was really neat seeing it turned around, where it was things, instead of coming into my language, leaving my language into something else, and seeing it struggle moving in that direction to capture references and, wordplay and jokes and whatnot. Or just the way that, how, other connotations around things where it's just oh, we all have this collective cultural experience that makes this little segment make instant sense to us, that it's well, Japan doesn't have that. How do you get that across to them in this situation,
I think it makes you, at least for me, this is kind of why, even in a world of perfect machine translation, I would still want to learn languages, is because every translation is an interpretation.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it makes you really it gives you a way to understand that without having to learn a whole other language and just start experiencing it. He makes a good case for it, at least in the other books. I haven't read this one.
Yeah, this one, the opening, and I don't know if it's just it was as good as this in the other ones, or just from talking to you so much, Ben. I was just really in tune with all the localization stuff, and was just oh my gosh, this is incredible. I need to talk to them about this right now. It's so good.
The Zelda one is neat but it's short, and there's not a lot to work with in the original Zelda. There's not a ton of dialogue. And they don't even get into kanji or anything, because the original Zelda only used katakana. They didn't have enough bits.
Yeah, they talk about it in here. It's older video games. It's we don't even have all the language systems. Yeah. This is what we're using.
So Earthbound was the one where they get into a lot of dialogue finally, and then it gets interesting. I mean, the Zelda one is interesting, but if you could probably start with this one. I mean,
well, they all stand on their own, right?
Yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was saying, if one of these games in particular is a game you really like, then, read that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Undertale, I think, is a really special thing. I guess it in some ways it's the reverse of Earthbound, because Earthbound does have a lot of American Western references inside of it in the original Japanese, where this is so clearly inspired by both Earthbound and a lot of Japanese things. I mean, it's one of those, well, how do you translate this one? It's it's kind of novel here. It's there's a character called the Tsundere plane. Or there's a joke early on when you talk to a cactus, and it's the cactus is truly the Tsundere of the plant world. And it's do you just directly translate that? It's technically, it's a Japanese word. Would it have the same connotation? But would it be as funny, because to them it's just a word, and not this funny thing that captures this concept.
It lets you know exactly where they.
But it gives you that concept. Yeah. It gives you the concept of hey, there's weeb influence here. Yeah. Where otherwise it'd just be we're speaking Japanese. We're people who live in Japan and speak Japanese. It's lost in a way, even though it's in Japanese already.
It signals a subculture in America. But
it's the whole thing of
well, they should leave it.
How do you work with a character that speaks? It's a character in a Japanese anime speaking English in a way that they wouldn't fully understand it. It's when you translate it, what do they speak then? What does Pepe Le Pew speak in France?
Well, it's how the Blue Ranger character in that one show we were watching speaks English all the time because he's a fancy lad.
Oh yeah.
But you can't. How do you capture that when it's the English dub? What does he speak?
I think in that case for Tsundere, they should leave it as Tsundere, but spell it in English to show
in English characters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is they've got more paints in that particular bucket that they have across all the different writing systems. So, but no, 1 billion zillion million %. Please check out all the Legend localization stuff, but just especially if you like Undertale, this one in particular, just I could read its entire content again. I'm really sad that if I ever get it, it's going to be years. If he ever does one on Deltarune, I just love reading about it. The author has talked in the past. He's one of the main guys behind the old Mother 3 fan translation, and he's talked about doing a Legends of localization on that, where it's this is a fan one and not the official one, and that has it, and I'm sure he'll talk about all of the particulars of that. And I've been waiting for years, and I'm dying for him to do that one day. But I think more than anything I've recommended on this podcast, I cannot recommend these books enough. They are some of my favorite books that I have ever read. I feel like they have given me a deeper appreciation for translation, localization, and video games, and just in a way that just tickles my brain to no end in a reason I don't exactly understand why or how, but I just find fascinating.
I would add there's just nothing like those.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those things where it's like the localizations of these games have shaped such a significant part of the subculture for so many people in our generation and the ones around it. And nobody writes about it. Nobody knows who did the localizations except this guy.
You might get some like little interviews or something,
Yeah.
but this is literally a ride along, and this one even more than the other ones. You're
Yeah.
literally riding along moment to moment, line, not even the major things, to not every little detail, but like most of them, where you get to see that process. That's why you, like I said, it like this one especially, it feels like this series of challenges and puzzles and battles where it's like making this one work, and how do we capture these things, and you got to think on it, and like. I don't think I've said it yet, but there's multiple people that worked on it, but to capture that voice, to have one singular voice, which is not always the situation that games get when they get translated, there was only one major translator, and he had help, but to help it keep one voice, there was essentially one guy who did all of it, and they specifically said, this is going to take longer, but we want to get this one right, because this is one to get right. And now Undertale is freaking massive in Japan, which is good because it's kind of a love letter to old Japanese translation. So it feels very, but if it had a bad translation, it wouldn't necessarily have done that.
Well, and like it's just you read all the time about. I mean, if you're me,
Yeah,
you read all the time about like translating like the Bible or Beowulf or like any of the old classics. And there's all these arguments between the translators about how it should have been done and all this stuff. And video games, nobody knew this was going to be important when they started doing these things. Nobody even knew to argue about it. And with video games, it's not like there's some ancient manuscript out there in a museum that we can all take a look at. Like these files and spreadsheets only exist in like proprietary computer systems, and only a handful of people ever get to look at the whole thing. So it's just really neat to hear him talk about it, because there's going to be more books like this in the future, but he's on like the cutting edge of it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's really neat from that angle too.
All right.
And to close this out, I will close this from one of the terrible translations from This Be Book Bad Translation video games.
Before that, just for everybody who should go out and find this, Legends of Localizations by Clyde
Mandolin, and you can find this on fangamer.com.
Awesome.
Along with a lot of other incredible merch that I enjoy. And so this final reading, never heard of this video game, but this is the page I turned to, and it struck my fancy, from 1994's Kingdom Grand Prix. Your technique is what marvelous. Now it is advancement to the following round. A more violent attack wait for you. Pay attention.
That means it's the end.
My only friend, the end.
Well,
dire.
It did sound like Kermit the Frog singing it, and it was pretty good.
Well, as normal, I want to thank everybody for listening. We have a lot of fun recording these, so we hope everybody enjoys them as much as we enjoy doing it. So we'd like to hear what you think about our podcast, and you can find all of our social media links, such as Twitter, Patreon, Facebook, and more, by going to our website, animepodcasterreincarnation.com. You can also find various articles on topics like new manga review, as well as the episode links up there. So go and check that out, and you can leave comments and all that fun stuff. You can even send us an email to isekaisenseisama@gmail.com. We've only got one email so far, and that was from Toby. We appreciate that. But anybody can send an email there and talk to us about whatever.
Yeah. Clearly, as you've seen, we respond. Maybe a little too much.
And if you would prefer to listen to this podcast in high quality stereo, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, where we simul-release all of the episodes.
Do you put it that like you were sitting in the room with us, so like I'm coming in on one side and Ben's coming in on the other one, and then you're in the middle?
You've never
channel?
listened to it?
No, why?
Yes, that's exactly what I
I
do.
don't listen to it on the YouTube channel. I don't have to do that with head. Like
it's
that's the problem. I
fully
listen to
stereo.
it on the podcast download and not the YouTube.
Yeah,
So.
it's fully stereo.
Am I in the left channel or in the right channel?
Yeah, it's from my perspective.
Okay, so it's Brad POV podcast recording.
Yeah. And before we go, I just wanted to remind you to check out Segoy Mart, where you can get 15% off your first order by using the link in the description or using the code APR15 at checkout. So Ben, what have you been talking about on Words About Books lately?
That's a good question.
Last episode I listened to was your judging books by its cover.
Yes.
6 or 5?
5. Yeah. Yeah, we got that. We've got The Maid coming up. Our first proper, like, book club book in a while. It's from the Good Morning America book club.
Oh my god.
And I think we treat it with the respect and gravitas it deserves.
I can't wait to listen to that. That if Nate has nothing but respect and gravitas. Kermit, you got anything you want to plug?
Listen to the last of the archive pop culture toxins about copyright copy wrong.
Yeah, that should be out the week after this comes out. So make sure you're subscribed. And as we mentioned at the beginning, or no, actually we mentioned that in the intro for that. So let us know what you think about the Pop Culture Talk Zone episodes, because if people like those, we'll maybe record another one. Well, once again, thanks for listening. And remember, if you find yourself confronted by a world with a monolithic culture, you can always make your own way.
I know what to do to get energy. Alexa, play Kickback. That went really long after a really long intro.
Actually, that was about the normal amount of time we take for those, but the intro was very long.
Yeah, and also like it's hot. Like I'm dying. I'm almost ready to do the freaking Henry Zabrowski take my shirt off, which like I've never ever ever done, and it's not even summer, which is very worrying.
It tasted like Eevee.
Pikachu on
Oh
it,
no,
and then
no,
the
you
little-
can't say that on the internet. No,
Why can't you say that?
like the tiny dog?
Hey Brad.
I'll tell you later.
Hey Brad.
Oh,
Anyway,
I vored a Pokemon when I ate it.
well, I have to cut that out. Well, now
By
you.
Segoy Mart. You two can for a Pokemon.
Just describe all eating as boring and make everybody uncomfortable. It's one of my favorite things. Remember, Anime Podcaster Resurrection 15.
Reincarnation.
Shoot, what did I say?
Resurrection.
Cut that.
There is an internet thing
Internet.
with Vaporeon.
Oh,
What?
I don't know anything about this.
What is this? I feel like this would be something I'd be aware of.
It's basically, well, so it's like I think it was originally like a green text.
Okay.
You know, the 4chan
yeah, no, I
thing.
know, I know.
Yeah.
Where this guy just described how Vaporeon was the perfect Pokemon to have sex with because of all of these different things. And like, because it's...
Is it tongue-in-cheek or is it like
No.
he is in there?
I mean,
It's always hard to tell with fucking 4chan green text if there's any amount of
anyway,
self-reflection in them.
it became a huge thing.
Yeah.
To the
I'm
point
sure,
where
because it's both funny and I get it. Like, sure, whatever.
you can't actually buy Vaporeon plushies anymore.
What? Really?
Every time that somebody releases a new line and they have Eevee and Voltreon or whatever, and they come out, the Vaporeon one is always
Because
sold
of
out
this?
immediately. Yeah, because people
It's
buy
not
them.
real.
They
whatever benefits they're talking about aren't real.
they buy them and they fuck them.
Yes, I
This
got
is
that.
You got to leave this in because this is the common ground I
This
keep
is
talking
the ending.
about.
This is Brad. This goes in at the end.
This is the culture.
We've already sworn a bunch. This is already an explicit episode.
You don't actually have to leave it in.
There is a.
I want you to put it at the end.
There's a YouTube video someone made recently. They animated.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they fucked it and then talked about it on a blog.
They basically animated the green text where it's like a anthropomorphized Vaporeon who is like reading all this stuff and getting excited for the master to come home. It's all as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, no.
Oh, God.
Every time I do this, I forget what the voice is last time, and I end up hurting my vocal cords.
I'm
in practice.
walking here.
I'm walking here.
He's my second favorite Japanese Italian next to Mario.
I think I like Truxon more than Mario.
Did you know in Super Dragon Ball Super Superhero Super that the side character Carmine is voiced by Charles Martinet?
I did not. That's
I learned
awesome.
that today. I did not recognize him, but in a review I was watching, somebody said it's Charles Martinet. I'm like, wow, I never would have guessed.
I'm glad you know, if you have this much trouble with Dragon Ball Super Superhero, I'm glad you weren't around for Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan.
Oh, yeah, no, I would have butchered it very quickly.
I really wish Chris Pratt would just go away.
Sandbagging that felt incredible. Yeah. I felt so powerful sandbagging that, and I'm glad Ben did too.
I just wanted that to be like the note it ends on.
Yeah.
And then the music cuts in.
Awesome.
I think we can all relate to that.
More violent indeed.
You, invaders, get you the hot bullets of shotgun to die.